All right, and we're going to call to order the Monday, November 2nd meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. We're going to start with our first closed session item. We're going to start with public comment regarding the closed session items. The first closed session item is conference with real property negotiator regarding 240 Tamil Vista Boulevard in Corte Madera. And the second closed session item is a public employee performance evaluation for our town manager. Do we have any public comment on these items? If so, please raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comment on closed session items?
No, we did not receive any emailed public comment on closed session items.
Okay, and we do not have any hands up from our three folks in the audience right now. So if you guys just joined us, we're adjourning to closed session now. We'll be back at 6:30 for the public portion of the meeting. So we're going to go ahead and call to order the public portion of the Monday, November 2nd meeting of the Corte Madera Town Council. Rebecca, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Casissa.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
Here.
Mayor Beckman.
Here, thank you. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. That brings us to item number 2, open time for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items that are not on our agenda. So if you've got something that's not on the agenda that you'd like to comment on, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Again, this is only for non-agenda items. So if you're here to comment on Project Home Key, which I think a lot of folks are, please save that. That's coming up in just a few minutes here. So with that, we've got one hand up on Zoom here. It went up a minute ago, so I'm not sure if it's for open time or for a specific item, but we're going to bring Lisa on here. Oh, her hand went down, so I think she's for a specific item. So we do not appear to have any hands up for open time. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comments for public open time?
I don't believe so. None that were sent to publiccomment@tcmmail.org, but I also wanted to note that we need a report out from closed session before we continue.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, we do. We had a closed session prior to the public portion of this meeting. The two topics were a conference with real property negotiator and a public employee performance evaluation, and we have no reportable action on either item. Thank you for reminding me, Rebecca. Appreciate that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close public open time. Nobody is raising their hand. There are no presentations, so that brings us to item 4, which is the consent calendar. These are items that are routine or have been previously discussed and do not require further discussion. Any member of the public or the council may pull a consent calendar item to be discussed. Todd, did I see a hand there?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item 4B when you get to that.
Sounds good. All right, we'll pull item 4B. Would any members of the council or staff like to pull any other consent calendar items? And if not, we're going to turn this over to the public. If anybody in the public would like to comment on the consent calendar as a whole or pull an item from the consent calendar, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. We'll give you guys a minute here. And seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council. I would entertain a motion on items 4A and 4C through 4F, and then we'll come back for 4B.
I'll second that.
Okay. You can put me down as making the motion then, Rebecca. And we will take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Casissa.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart.
He says yes.
Yes. Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. And then item 4B, Todd, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just quickly, this is an item as a follow-up to our previous workshop we had last week. In order to do the work between now and our follow-up meeting to begin the legal validation process, we are in need of approving these 2 contracts. What I'm asking for is that you also allow and delegate authority to your town manager and town attorney to make some minor changes in clarifying future cost in COVID-19 additional language for the Jones Hall professional services contract. Again, if there's anything in those changes that changes the overall budget, staff will bring that back to the council, but short of that, I'm asking for that authority. So an additional request there. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Got it. Thank you. Any questions for Todd on that? No, then we're going to open up item 4B here for public comment. If anybody in the public would like to comment on this item or the revisions that Todd just said, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. And seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for comments or a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve 4B and also authorize the town manager and town attorney to make minor changes relating to COVID and as otherwise is noted.
Second.
Great, thank you. Can we have a vote, please, Rebecca?
Councilmember Casissa,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart,
Yes.
Mayor Beckman.
Yes, thank you. That concludes the consent calendar. There are no public hearings, so that brings us to our business items. The first is item 6A, which is a discussion of Project Home Key, which is Marin County's bid to purchase a small hotel here in Corte Madera, 1591 Casa Buena Drive, and convert it to permanent supportive housing. And just a note here, under state law, the town doesn't have any decision-making authority on this item. This is a county project, not a town project. But we're facilitating this discussion to basically bring in members of the public to help kind of construct feedback for the county on this item. And then we're hoping to move forward working with the county to make sure that this project is carried out in a way that is successful for everyone in our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd for a staff report, and then we're going to do council questions, then we'll bring it to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to try to provide a brief overview of how we got here. This is a unique situation, one that your town manager has not been faced with to date over really the lack of local control and the speed that this process has really moved at. And so what I want to do is I want to just kind of summarize the situation where we stand right now and then set the stage, hopefully, for this conversation, because one of the things that I'm most proud about this community, this council and staff, is that I think we problem solve better than anyone. And I think we're faced with the ultimate challenge of doing that tonight in a workshop format like we are being asked to do. And so briefly, I want to go back in time. The Marin County Council and Mayors and Council members, the Council of Mayors and Council members, known as the MCCMC, formed a committee a couple years ago. And really one of the major priorities of that committee, which represents all cities and towns in the county of Marin, put a focus on services and homelessness. And really, some of the work of Homeward Bound, Catholic Charities, and some of the other great work being done in our county, really wanted to expand and support that movement, but also move to residency, long-term residency, and to support those in our county that are homeless, and then also need, those services so needed in our communities. And with that, the committee came up with a number of recommendations, and one of them follows a lot of the principles of what Home Key is really about, looking at properties within the county, providing grant money to provide long-term housing and services for those most in need. What's happened over the last few years is that the state and the state legislature and governor have really put a priority too on long-term housing and housing in general. And they've done it at the expense of local control and process. And what I would say is no one knows better than the importance of process than the town of Corte Madera over the past 2 decades. And so this one is especially hard for us to really endure. And I from my standpoint as your town manager, knowing the thoughtfulness of this town council and our community, I didn't appreciate the Marin IJ article on August 20, or on the 24th of September that basically summarized how the town feels about a project like this. And so I hope that we can really bring that home tonight in our conversation moving forward. Some quick timelines, because members of the community over the past few weeks have asked staff, when did we know about this and how did it happen so fast? And so as staff, I want to bring to your attention, of when did the town manager know about this? When did your planning director know about it? When did the council know about it? And so, as you know, home key funding came out in July, being available to cities and counties in the state of California on projects like this. On August 6th of 2020, county staff notified your town manager that they were interested in a number of sites in Marin County that could potentially be covered under the home key grant process. And, you know, at the time, you know, staff, again, it's at the direction of the MCCMC. We support the concept. Corte Madera will always be part of the conversation and doing our part of evaluating properties. But that wasn't the request. The request was a property was already located. It's the one that we're talking about tonight. But again, that's all the information we had. The request to staff at the time was, as soon as you decide to submit a grant, we request that you come to our council and provide a basic informational overview presentation style to our council and our community so we can start this process and understand what we're talking about. In mid-August to the end of August, that grant was submitted. Staff requested, when it was brought to our attention, that the county come to us again at our September 1st meeting and provide, again, a presentation of an overview of what is this grant even about? What is it? What kind of project are we talking about? And to really start to engage our community. At the time, the county wasn't positioned to have that conversation. Again, a lot of questions. It was moving fast for them too, and they really didn't have a lot of answers and weren't prepared to come to the town yet. On September 18th, I was advised that the Board of Supervisors had a closed session a couple days previously to September 18th. And that they were prepared to start presentations to the Board of Supervisors and the City of San Rafael on the grant process and the types of projects that we're talking about. Again, at that time, we requested a presentation for the town of Corte Madera. Over the course of the next week, we were advised by county and San Rafael staff that a Marin IJ article was being written on the 3 potential properties, one of them being this Corte Madera property. I'll tell you, at that time, I was disappointed as the town manager that I felt like ultimately this is potentially a really good project, something that this county needs, and the funding's available to us. And I was concerned at the time, and I shared that with the county, as did your planning director, that getting in front of the community and surprising them without having a presentation was the wrong way to go and was going to set us off on a course that really brought us to where we are today. And so disappointed in that. And I say that not as a criticism, but as a public entity, process is important. And when it represents this town, our voice is going to be heard. It was a frustrating moment back in September. At that point, the team got together. Adam Wolf, our planning and building director, at that point, I lost him for the next 30 plus days to this date and really worked on this project, really to get answers for the community, to facilitate a process, taking the lead of what is necessary to really get this conversation going. And so we had our first meeting in October. It was on October 6th. We held a presentation, which was approximately 2 hours plus in our council meeting. We followed that up because it was really clearly obvious to us that there's a lot of work to be done. And so we held a second meeting. It was a community workshop on October 19th. We also the mayor invited Supervisor Rodoni to attend our every other Tuesday 1-hour community chat. And really, and this topic was dedicated to that 1 hour. And so your staff, the council, everything that we did within our processes over the past, going back to October 6th to now, every time we had an opportunity to have a discussion with our community, to get questions answered, those are really the steps that we took to help facilitate this conversation. One, as the mayor said, we don't have a legal right or input on the project. We can't necessarily stop it. And we'll talk about that tonight over what some of the other jurisdictions have talked about. And it wasn't our obligation to notice the community, but it's our community. And so we took a leadership role. I really appreciate the council and Adam Wolf's efforts over the past few weeks to really do that. And so really going back to when this became a realization of this was coming our way and getting that first presentation to our community, the goal of staff has always been to facilitate the conversation, to help get questions to our answers, to help make this project successful if we can do it, but also allow the county enough time, because keep in mind, this is fast for them too, to get the questions that they need answered. And very early on, our community has always said, let's get a fact sheet, frequently asked questions. You know, as we go through this process over the last 3 weeks, let's just add to it. It may start with 2 answers, but let's get to where we need to get to. About 3 hours before the meeting, it was brought to my attention that the fact sheet was available. It's on our website. It's linked to this agenda. We're going to go through it tonight. You have no staff report for this meeting because it's not our project, and there are so many unknowns that we've worked so hard to get to. We're going to try to facilitate this conversation. And so I want to end with this. Jim Robinson, our retired town council member at one of the community workshop, I believe, asked the staff, the county and staff, on projects like this, he always likes to ask the question, and he did. And he said, what have you done to notice the community? And, you know, it's not necessarily a requirement for the county of Marin, but it's something we take very seriously, and we've done our best as Corte Madera. But one of my criticisms, and it's directed at the county, but I take it as being part of that. You know, I think we need to own areas that we can do better. And if anything comes from this process in the county of Marin, not just in the county, for the county unincorporated, but for Corte Madera or any other jurisdiction, that just because you don't have to do it, you need to do it because it's right. And noticing is so important on these projects that are going to be fast tracked today and in the future, that I hope the one thing that comes from this is that our cohorts really take seriously the obligation and notice and really tell that story to as many people as possible that could be impacted by these projects that really strip us of local control. And it's one that, as your town manager and the director of planning, we take seriously, and it's a lesson learned for us. And I think we've done our best under the circumstances, but this is a tough one. And so tonight, what I would like to do, if the council would allow me, but I'm your town manager, I'll direct this any which way. I want to show what we're about in the town of Corte Madera. And the town of Corte Madera never said no to this project. The town of Corte Madera, our community, is surprised by it. And they're like, engage us, listen to us. And so that's what your staff has done. And what we want to do is really take this agenda item and say, let's do our part, and let's be good partners. But again, we're not going to be good partners at the expense of the town of Corte Madera. And so we want to craft this conversation, working through the mayor and the council, of getting your feedback of this is what success looks like for the town of Corte Madera. And so I'm going to put on the screen, if you allow me, I want to share a screen. It's a Word document. It's rough because, again, we're not talking at the community or this council. We're right there with you. We want to problem solve this. And so what I think your staff has heard from you over the past few meetings, we want to give, after this meeting, through the mayor and your staff, to Supervisor Radoni and the Board of Supervisors, this is what success looks like for us on a project like this. And if you can meet our success points, because words matter, we're going to work with you, and we're going to see a really special project that makes this community better. But if you can't meet these criteria, words matter, and we have avenues available to us as well that we will consider. And so I don't want to take this as, I think in some of the Milpitas, following the Novato conversation, I don't think it's necessary to take this as a controversial or heated discussion. I think we hear the community. I think let's show the County of Marin what we're all about. And so with that, if you'll allow me, Mr. Mayor, I just want to share my screen. Technology, let's see if we can do it. Can everybody see my screen? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't see anyone. Okay, So I'm going to start here. So this is what success looks like for the town of Corte Madera. Again, this is how I see this, and we're going to have a lot of public comment, seeing the participants on the screen. This is I think we've heard what you've said, and just knowing our expertise and experience over 22 years of working in this community, what we think works on a project like this, and to talk it out with the council and the community, and to add to this and see if we're on the right path. But some of the things we've heard is number one, it's a commitment. It's going to be it's going to be a commitment, not only financially, but in words and in deed. And so we want a commitment from the county to provide resources to facilitate and staff a working group. We've called it a task force over other meetings, and it's made up of county representatives and a site operator at a minimum. In the town, we commit ourselves to providing a staff person or persons and community representatives to this conversation. And really the purpose of this group, and I'll give a couple examples of other successes. One of them's over on San Clemente, affordable housing project that we had. The purpose of this group is to create a forum and decision-making authority that would provide recommendations and have the authority to immediately problem solve issues that need to be solved. This is really going to be important when we talk about the upfront, when we talk about the interim housing phase, because we're starting to get some knowns, but still this is an unknown. There's some unknowns, and we're not going to get all the answers that we need over the next 30 days. This is going to be a process that we have to have the decision-making matrix in place in advance to really work through some of this. And so we see a few key bullet points. Provide ongoing direct information and communication to our residents. Again, our residents are going to be part of this group. To provide a forum for community to raise issues and directly to the appropriate governmental officials. To collectively work towards solutions to issues and concerns that are raised, and to ensure accountability throughout the project from the inception. What we've heard, and we'll talk about it, but over the first couple of years, it's the interim housing. And I know the word shelter has been mentioned, and so it's for us to talk about, but we're starting to get some knowns of what that would look like. But as we transition over the first couple of years, there's a long-term housing phase, and really this is the long-term, this is what we're trying to do in this county, to find long-term housing. When we transition from this phase, I think what I've heard, and I definitely want us to think about this, that I think the town would want some sort of consideration for the following. Corte Madera residents qualifying for this housing should receive special consideration. You know, this is our town. We're doing, you know, this project is in our community. I would hope that our residents, if they qualify, would have some sort of special consideration. What that looks like, I'm not sure, but I think we should talk about that, and we should really demand that. Two, the working group should play an important role in evaluating decision-making and decisions for long-term housing applications. And I understand that the short-term part of it is based on need and a series of evaluations. And so I see this committee on the short term not being necessarily involved in who is housed on an interim basis there. But as issues arise, if they do, I absolutely see this working group being part of that, especially with Central Marin Police Authority and our staff and our residents. If we have to make a change with housing, we can do that immediately. But longer term, I would hope that the town and our representatives have a role in that evaluation and decision-making process. We also understand that personal information of our residents at the supportive housing facility cannot always be disclosed or can't be disclosed. And more information needs to be provided regarding how residents will be selected at this site. And so there's a lot of work to be done in this area. Two, the county has to staff an on-site manager as long as this program is in place, both in the short term and the long term, and a long-term financial commitment to other on-site services, including security, behavioral health, social services, and case management, really what this program is about. So it shouldn't be an issue, but we should have that in the agreement, that a commitment to those services, because this is what's going to make it successful. I put security at the top, and I'll talk for calls for service later. I'm not as concerned as some of the residents have raised. It's definitely a conversation we need to have. But if we're going to do something like this, a definite long-term commitment to behavioral health, social services, and case management, is going to be critical. And how I see the on-site manager role would be, it's an on-site manager, but as resources are necessary on a 24-hour basis, we have the ability to call in these resources. Number 3, additional funding beyond the negotiated purchase price for significant exterior landscape and site improvements at the site. And a commitment to allow town staff and the community input into those proposed changes. This could be a project of the working group, or it could be a broader conversation. Number 4 is to provide a commitment to long-term upkeep of the property and for repairs and maintenance. And so this is both in any agreement I would hope that the Board of Supervisors would agree to, but also financially, showing that support financially. Again, those are the starting points to the conversation tonight. I'm going to turn it over to our planning and building director in a second to add anything that he would like to. But again, number 5, it's additional items. What else should we be thinking about of what success looks like for the town of Corte Madera? Those in the community that are on this call, I hope that I and Adam and staff has listened and summarized some of your concerns and your talking points of what yes could potentially look like for you. Again, we understand that there's a lot more to work through. I think the other part of it, we'll do it tonight. But again, 3 to 4 hours ago, the fact sheet went out with the County of Marin. I'm going to ask Adam to actually work through the fact sheet because it's the first time we've all had an opportunity to look at it together. But this fact sheet should be updated on a routine basis as we work through this. After tonight, if this is a project that we think we can share what success looks like for us if they can meet our request, and I don't think anything on here is shocking, is unreasonable, then this would go to the Board of Supervisors pretty immediate. I know the mayor, I think at the end of this would like to work with Supervisor Rodoni and staff before the Board of Supervisors meeting, which I think is the 10th or 17th of this month. And to understand where they land and how they feel about our request. Again, the final decision making isn't on the 10th or 17th. There's still a lot of work to be done, but this would be a really good roadmap for Corte Madera and the Board of Supervisors to work towards really a successful project. But ultimately, if the council and this community feels like, we can't get to where we need to get to, then that would be important for staff to know tonight as well. But staff is approaching this as I think the council is, as let's make sure we're heard, let's make sure we provide what success looks like for us. And I think we've heard our community, and I hope we've started the conversation for tonight and moving forward. And with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn it over to Adam if there's anything that you would like to add on this overview, or how the mayor or Adam would like to proceed with the fact sheet.
Yeah, Todd, I don't want to take a lot of time just because I know there's a lot of folks who want to have their voice heard. So I will just thank, Todd. Todd gave a really good overview of what we've been trying to do and problem solve. I will tell you, I've been in pretty regular contact with county staff and also Supervisor Rodoni's office regarding some of these, at least the framework, especially this working group. And I think it's important that in concept, there's been, I think, agreement that these are good ideas and reasonable, in particular, the working group and the additional funding for the site improvements. But I think it's really important that we nail down some of the details and whatever we communicate to the county at this time. Hopefully after this meeting, we can nail those down. And obviously Todd touched on noticing and whatnot. And I think that just is critical moving forward. We've heard that time and again. Information is really critical and is powerful for our residents to have that at their fingertips. And like you said, I would just echo Todd, this is different. Obviously, we are getting information as it comes in, and staff is learning as the community is learning, and we're trying to turn that quickly around to have forums like this so everybody in our community can be notified and informed. And I think that just needs to continue on. And I will say, to all of you, I'm dedicated to making that happen and happy to work with the working group, with the county, whoever, our community and residents, however I need to problem solve and hopefully, make a successful project out of this. So with that, I'll just leave it to you, and we're happy to add to the fact sheet. I will say on the FAQ, it really, I'm looking through it as well right now, and sort of it is new information. Some of it has been said at past meetings, but I don't know. A lot of this I think should be digested. We can do it tonight, but I think really the county's starting to put forward in some written information, which I think is really helpful. We've had a lot of verbal comments, but getting it down in paper and writing is key here. So, and some of it speaks to what Todd had mentioned in the introduction, and we can get into that further if need be. But I will just say the conversation's ongoing amongst all the stakeholders involved, and I've met individually with some of the local community residents, and hope to continue to do that moving forward.
Thank you guys both. I don't want to spring this on you because I know the fact sheet literally just came out like 2 hours ago, which is its own frustration because we've been asking for this for weeks and it's a critical foundation to this whole discussion. But if it works for you guys, do you think that we could maybe gloss through it real fast all together right now before we go to public comment? Just because I feel like there's so many questions in there that folks are wondering who are on the line right now. And I think that might help us just answer some questions before we get started here.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
In the FAQ. Okay. Okay. So I think this is the PDF version. I do have a slide that can show you exactly where to access this, and I'm happy to leave up also the information at the end at any time of sort of the next step, which is the Board of Supervisors meeting and how to comment on that at that meeting as well. But essentially, they're providing, some of the information is very basic for those who may not be at all informed about what is Project Home Key and what were the properties that were identified. And then others, I think, do hit on some of the questions that have been raised both in public meetings in Corte Madera and also maybe in some private conversations through Supervisor Rodoni's office. Or I should say so here's it talks about how the properties were identified, and I think talking about the county just put out an RFP basically at the beginning of this process. They didn't know who was going to respond to that, and I think it is worthwhile noting that essentially the owners of the 1591 Casa Buena, the former America's Best Value Inn, they on their own, without any consultation with the town either, they not that they have to, but they sent this back to and responded to the RFP. And they're in the middle of a construction project. It's obviously a very difficult time for hotels. And I think they realized that this was sort of an opportunity as well for them. So this talks about the process, which Todd went over, so I won't get into that too much, but it talks about when they applied for home key funds, getting to the point of why there wasn't more community outreach early in the process, and at least their statement regarding that. Obviously, a very quick turnaround in timeline with the key point there is that the funds have to be used by the end of the year, which is
Adam,
pushing.
can I just jump in? We can only see like the very top portion of your screen right now. So we can see from the header through, like the main header through the header, how were the properties identified.
No, I will. Is that better?
Not for me. I'm not sure if other folks might be able to see more than I can.
I see just the same.
Yeah, it didn't move. It didn't scroll down.
Oh boy, all right.
You want me to try?
Yeah, why don't you try? Unless this works, I don't know.
Oh, that worked. It's
Worked,
small.
except now it's unreadably small.
All right, I'm sorry. How about
There you go. One more.
There you go.
There you
Nope.
go. That's
too big?
We'll go there.
Yeah, so
Perfect.
Okay, so
right.
that's the top again, and I went over some of these, identifying the projects. How did Marin County apply for the home key funds? Again, why wasn't there more community outreach on the early in the process? That having to do with the timelines for actually using the funds by the end of the year. And I would point out this is a living document. This is going to evolve over time. Addressing the site, the question of the shelter, that it's been that is the word that's been used, but it's really interim housing. I think this is an important one. They talk about will not look like what most people think of when they think of homeless shelters. They'll be admitted. Clients will be admitted by referrals from community agencies like hospitals and nonprofits, will be allowed to stay as long as they are working on a housing plan with their case manager, and really creates a stable population, able to focus on their next steps. This particular project in Corte Madera would be for homeless individuals. And then this gets into a little bit of how residents will be chosen. So for the interim housing, people will be referred by an agency that is working with clients. And these are some of the Marin County organizations that are currently part of that process, the referral process. And so there is obviously and I think this has been emphasized, that the county and these organizations do know a lot of these individuals and will, the referral system is sort of based on their knowledge of the actual needs that some individuals may have. And obviously it's voluntary based. So only those individuals, homeless individuals who are seeking to shelter would be referred here. The permanent piece of this, permanent supportive housing, which we were told was, going to be transitioned. This project would be transitioned from originally spring, summer. I think in this document, it actually said this year. So to be honest, that's a little concerning that it keeps getting extended, the time in which that transition happens. But the permanent supportive housing would be referred through the coordinated entry program, which has been very successful. And that's, I think they're speaking to the housing first model with that. And again, during the pandemic, we're talking about most vulnerable for COVID as well. Catholic Charities has been identified as the services provider for Corte Madera. And so I think below they talk about, I think importantly, there's some more information about actually what specific services will be part of the Corte Madera project. There's a point about how many current people are currently homeless in Marin, and the last count in Corte Madera was 39 individuals who were unsheltered. Addressing some of the questions that were raised about the population again and where they're coming from. So some statistics here just about the majority of people who would be living here are really from Marin County and from our unsheltered population in the county, which Todd spoke to earlier about the work that the county's been doing and all of the cities really have been doing for several years now. And this next question speaks to that. Some of the other projects that have been built pursuant to the Housing First model in the last 5 years. And then this is what services will be provided on site. So I think this is some new information regarding the interim housing phase, 24/7 staffing, 2 meals a day will be provided. There were some questions about where people would go to eat, and given that there aren't kitchens in the interim phase. So I think it's important to see that they're actually providing meals on site. Those will likely be delivered into the site. Housing focused, of course, case management, which they talked about earlier. connection to behavioral health services and social services benefits, including Medi-Cal and Social Security, that will all be facilitated by Catholic Charities in the interim phase. And then they're providing transportation vouchers to get to other locations. And then there's a slew of services that once the property transitions to permanent housing permanent supportive housing would be on site. There would be an on-site property manager during the permanent supportive housing phase, and then a case manager for all of the residents at that time to help fulfill their needs and provide services. Again, on participants, how to get around in terms of transportation, a question about safety for residents, which I think the county's answering from their perspective at the broad level, but I think we can also supplement that as needed later. And then how do tenants afford these units? So here there is they are saying that there will be federal housing vouchers applied to this project. And so I think that's important to see that covered here. And that it will be essentially a project-based Section 8 facility. And so those units that will get the project-based Section 8, that money that the operator receives from that will actually be able to be turned around and used for the services. Again, I think one of the points that they made, which is unusual, is that there will not be any debt service because of the program on the building itself. And so any revenues accrued from rents, including federal-based Section 8 vouchers, can be used on the services and operations. There's accessibility requirements for some of the units. Obviously, this is a hotel that does not have an elevator, so anybody who has actually physical disabilities would have to be located on the ground floor. I will say, as part of the current building permit that the town has issued, there are required ADA accessibility improvements to the parking lot site, in terms of ramps and whatnot. So that would have to be done before residents would be able to get into the site. And they're answering for the costs, I guess, generically for the city. I think in the past, we have pointed out that our revenue for the town from this project, when it was actually fully occupied, and again, hotel revenue obviously is down across the board at this time, but that was about $30,000. And then there's likely some property tax revenue as well that would impact the town. And then here's the part about ongoing services. And the cost per unit of this HomeKey project, approximately, which making the case that this is much less than the cost that we've been, as a county, providing to service the unsheltered and homeless population that lives in the county. And ongoing costs. So again, this is, I made this point earlier. So just how do ongoing costs get paid for? Again, the rent, then the project-based Section 8 will help provide for the funding for that. And here's the statement about just some statistics in terms of the Housing First model and how that is addressed the homeless condition in Marin County over the past several years, and really the benefits that they've seen through their efforts in that regard. So I'll leave it there. That's what they have for now. And again, that was, I think if I can show, try this again. But this is they want to, emphasize that this is a living document. It will be updated. And I'm going to stop that share for now. So if you want, I also have the link for members of our community if they want to access that, where to where they can get that. And let's see.
Oh, fantastic. You're going to put that link up there for us?
Yeah. Does that work?
That's perfect. Thank you. That was actually going to be one of my questions.
Right. So this is, I wanted just to put a slide up here for our community members to recognize that next week, on November 10th, 2020 at 9 a.m., the county will be considering the purchase and sale agreement for this property. And these are links basically to their how to provide public comment. And there's frequently asked questions document that I just put up, can be accessed at this second link on this slide. And the notice that we did send out to residents, and that has been sent out on all our media platforms as well, provides a link to how to, I guess, access the video conferenced Board of Supervisors meeting next week. And again, we're here to assist and make sure that any residents and our community members who want to comment and attend that meeting, that they have access to that information, and happy to further assist if this isn't enough at this time.
That is fantastic, Adam. Thank you very much for doing that. If there's no other elements to the staff report, we're going to go to questions from council members, and then we're going to open it up for public comment. Yeah, Fred?
Yeah, Todd, I think you mentioned before that you didn't think security was going to be an issue. Can you just address that?
I should never say security is not going to be an issue. I think security throughout our town should, you quoted me properly. But yes, I think it's important, and I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation that we need to have with our community about education, of just hearing this conversation, not only for this neighborhood, but throughout our town. I was going to work with the mayor in our upcoming community chat and just keep having some conversations about what types of crime do we see in our community, and what are we doing about it, and what can we do about it as a community. And so I think there's a lot to be learned with that. What I'll tell you is, just based on my experience with Homeward Bound and Catholic Charities, but really Homeward Bound, when we start to get into this long-term housing, just a really good relationship, very impressive resume, so to speak, in this county. I can't speak enough about them. And so I have a lot of faith in, when issues come up, of problem solving them immediately and handling them before they even become a community issue. That's their record. And so that's based on my practice of being in law enforcement in Corte Madera for over 21 years. And so I can say that based on my experience. And so I feel more comfortable we're starting to work through it now, but the first 2 years as we transition, again, this isn't your typical, what you think of as a shelter and the types of calls for service you're going to see. It's interim housing. We need to continue this conversation and talk about it. And as we start to transition to long-term housing, with what we're talking about and what success looks like for Corte Madera, I'm not as concerned about the security. The security comes with having the engagement of that team, that task force, and that group that meets monthly, that talks about issues as they come up and problem solves. That's the most important piece. And keep in mind, as part of that conversation, Central Marin Police Authority is part of it. I'm prepared at some point in this meeting, if you would like, I think it'll come up in the community at some point, to show some statistics, but those are statistics. I feel more comfortable having a long-term housing project like we're talking about now than having the current hotel. If you want to talk about calls for service and the types of calls that we're going to see, I actually feel more comfortable based on my experience talking about this long-term housing project. And I think the
I'll just say, for anybody who doesn't know, Todd is speaking to us now as our former chief of police. So he knows what he's talking about on this stuff.
Yeah. And I talk about it just from the standpoint of, we have some statistics just for the Casablanca Meadow Suite area. But for instance, if you look at where crime happens in our community, a majority of it is theft related. And it's not residential burglaries. Those are the most scary. We had a couple in the Casablanca. There's a caller right now that was a victim of 2 residential burglaries back to back. We average in our community, on average, about 10 to 12 of those, 1 a month, but 12 a year. but those are scary. And it doesn't matter what anyone says, that's scary. And so it's important to know, you know, how we can prevent those and how we can handle those. But if you, for instance, Marin Joe's, one of our favorite restaurants in town, it has a parking lot up above, and it's out of the area of public view. We get a lot of auto break-ins. If you look at a majority of our thefts or our crime in Corte Madera, 70% of it is preventable. It's crimes of opportunity. You know, and again, it's us leaving, you know, things in plain view, not locking the vehicle. You know, 70% would be prevented if we took basic steps. And so we take a lot of effort to try to mitigate those and through education. When you're looking at a project like we're talking about, what you're going to see in calls for service are going to be medical aid. We're going to have some mental health calls. We're going to have some extra patrols, but those are really going to be the types of calls that we're going to see that'll basically increase. And so that's just a fact. That's what's going to happen. Right now, what we're seeing at our hotels, again, we did Novato and Corte Madera took a sample of all of our hotels, and we went back over the past 5 years. And we kind of compared those to like projects like this. And what we saw at our hotels, a lot of them were, you'll see more calls for service at hotels. Not to say hotels are bad by any means. We're in the top 3% in the nation, folks, in crime. We're in the top 3% of safest communities in the nation. So we're safe, but we can always be better. But what I'm saying is when you think about a project in a community, you have to compare apples to apples. And not to say it makes anyone feel better, but a project like this, you're not going to see increased crime. You're just not. It's going to be different. It's going to be mental health. It's going to be supportive types of calls. It's just a fact. And I know we've compared King Street as an example, and it's an important one because you have multiple people living in King Street in a house, a residential house. And you know, you're going from that to like 19 units. And so there is a difference because there's more people, but there's a lot of similarities in the infrastructure to make that successful. And that's what we're talking about tonight. If you have to take important steps and have mechanisms in place up front to problem solve issues as they happen, because we're not going to be able to solve this today or a month from now. This is a long-term process that we have to put in place to be successful.
Okay, I'm sorry, Eli, I have a couple more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Adam mentioned that we probably have some lost revenue, the sense of property tax, and I think transit occupancy tax. Is there any effect, and again, I don't know the specific dollar amounts, is there an effect on our budget by losing that revenue? And or do you see Marin County reimbursing us for any lost revenue?
Yeah, so from just a revenue perspective, it always makes, you know, the Novato project was a big one because that was a big revenue for them, and transient occupancy tax. For us, you have to look at the height of the hotel. Pre-COVID, it was about 3 or 4 years ago. It brought in about $35,000 annually. I think if you look at the renovations and that they're making now, and if it continues to be a hotel post-COVID, when we start to recover in the next, the future years, you're probably looking at a lost revenue of about $40,000 in TOT monies, and then also property tax. So we're going to lose about $50,000 in potential revenue moving forward. Today in our budget of how we think about last year, this year, next year, just due to COVID and the renovations they're making, we really, like I told you, this year, we're anticipating zero revenue outside of property taxes, which is about $5,000 to $10,000 to the town of Corte Madera. So it's not something that we're expecting at this point, but if you think about it moving forward, you're talking about a $50,000 lost revenue. And so I think that is a good question, Councilmember Casissa, of how do we look at that and consider that and what success looks like for us.
Okay, and then it may be too early in the process, but the committee that you're talking about, do you have any of the mechanics on that? Like if, and again, it may be too early in the process, you know, how community members could get involved, how you see that being structured. Again, if it's too early, because I think this only came out today.
Yeah. You know, Adam might be able to touch on this too, but I'll tell you what Adam did in the last 30 days. That was really just shows you we have a good one on our hands in him of taking really those that are interested in problem solving with us. And I think taking, you know, the top 5 and, you know, doing interviews and selecting them, but having 5 and really bringing them to the table and problem solving with Adam and your town manager, and then the county staff, and then whoever the property, you know, whoever the manager is on site. And this is something that you put in place on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, or as needed when issues arise. Because today, there are things that'll happen tomorrow that we haven't thought about, and you just have to have that body in place. I give the example to this of the San Clemente process. It was really controversial early on when we did that as a town. I was part of that on the police authority side. And we had a similar body in place that worked with on-site management as issues arose. And all of the decision makers were part of that. We even had community members part of it. And I think it's a successful process or project today because of that. And that's really what I'm using as my experience. I think it's important, and you absolutely have to have those key players. Those bullet points you saw tonight, by the way, what success looks like for the town of Corte Madera, that wasn't from your staff, that wasn't from the county of Marin, that wasn't from anyone, but I think a lot of those people that have their hands raised right now on this call, they're the ones that brought those ideas to the table.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to say that those conversations have started. Just within even today, I was on the phone with Supervisor Rodoni's office about the working group. I've talked to Ashley Hart McIntyre at the county staff. I think what's key though, and I would make this recommendation, which you saw, we specifically use the language of making sure that the county provides some facilitation and resources to sort of lead that effort, because it's significant. I mean, it needs to be, it's a lot of work to actually make sure that is a productive environment and useful for people to engage in, and it's time and energy. It may not be dollar amounts, but it's staff time and energy. So I just put that for your thoughts.
Okay. And
Fred, did you have any more?
Yeah, just one last question. I'm sorry.
Sure, and then we'll go to David and Charles after.
Yeah, it seems like this is success document you put together. It seems like what we're attempting to do is to integrate with Marin, with the county and Marin, and also partner with them, right? So it's more like a partnership type thing versus them going, this is what we're doing.
That's correct. And as Adam said, we think they should take the lead on that. They should take ownership in the lead. And I think over some of these questions that have been directed back to the town, similar to noticing and process, and if the town's interested in doing that, we'll consider it. We think the county should take the lead, to Adam's point.
Okay, thanks.
All right, David.
Thank you. Because a lot of the letters of concern and support both focus on management, my question is to get real clear on one of the points of success that you suggested, Todd, is to, and I think you said it a little too quickly, you said to have the county have an on-site manager. Did you not mean that to have Homeward Bound have a on-site manager, and they would be then calling in the services of Catholic Charities? So it's not a Catholic Charities property manager, but rather a Homeward Bound property manager. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, for clarifying that. Yes, that's exactly what I meant by that statement.
Okay. So that to me, that's kind of the crux of what's going to turn out to be success. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Charles?
So my only question is just a clarification. So we talk about the loss of hotel revenue and the property tax. So the reason that we wouldn't receive property tax is because the eventual owner is either the county or a nonprofit, and so therefore they're non-taxable. Is that, it just hasn't, after the fact, once the county buys it, just understanding why that wouldn't be taxable, or why the Section 8, ultimately that's a federal program, if those incomes are coming in, if that's taxable. I'm just curious. It's not that I want to take away from those kind of entities. It's just a question that came up in my mind, just to close the loop on that financing.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Exactly, is that it would be either a governmental entity or a tax exempt entity that would be owning it. The last conversation we had on ownership was that it was actually put out there that because of the size of this particular project of being pretty small, the county may actually maintain ownership over the property itself, and just hire the managers to actually, have some arrangement with them to maintain and operate facility as a property manager.
And they would pay fees and special assessments, but not real property taxes, correct? I think
I'm not sure on that, and Todd, maybe we can have Daria get that.
San Clemente Place pays special assessments and fees and water and sewer and so forth, but not real property tax.
All right.
Hey, Todd, we can't hear you, even though you're not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yes, you're correct, Mr. Vice Mayor. There are certain fees that would be part of that, but the overall property tax formula would not. They would not be subject to.
Great. Charles, any other questions? Okay, awesome. Bob?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just have a couple questions. One, I was just wondering, could we possibly get, do we have a home key information page on our website right now? I know we've been putting up notifications, but do we have like an actual even if it's super brief and just says and just like even just links to the counties? I think it'd just be helpful, because a lot of folks out there in the community don't realize that this is a county project and not a town project. So they come to us looking for the information, and then they're like, why is there nothing here? So I think if we don't have a page up there, could we get one, please?
Yes.
That would. Great, thank you. That's my first question. My other one, I was just thinking, so we know that there's a deadline for them to buy the property because they need to expend this state money by a certain date or they're going to lose it. Is there a deadline for occupancy, do we know, or is that kind of undefined?
Yeah, I think what we've been told, and it actually, I don't see it in the FAQ, or at least I didn't in my quick look at it, but my understanding is that the within 30 days of closing on the financing for the purchase of the site, 50% occupancy needs to be achieved. So that's 9 of the 18 units would need to be achieved. I don't know beyond that. And again, we're receiving the information, as much information as we can, but that isn't, in terms of how long can that go, for months. With 50% occupancy. I mean, obviously, I think the goal would be to, especially during this time in the winter months of COVID, trying to get it fully occupied. But I think that's the minimum requirement, is 50% occupied.
Sorry, one more time. You said that was 50% occupancy by when?
30 days after
30, okay.
the closing of the financial transaction.
Okay, that's a pretty quick turnaround as well. Okay, okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. You guys all just asked some great questions, so thank you. I think we're about to hear a bunch more really good questions from the public. So we're going to go ahead and open this up now to public comments. We're going to turn it over to all the folks on the line here. We've got a bunch of hands up right now. We also received a lot of emailed public comment about this. Those emails are visible online for everybody to see. They're part of the public record for this meeting. So those exist there. If you'd like to make a comment on this item today live here on this meeting, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom. You can also email public comment at tcmmail.org if you would like to make a comment, but don't want to, come on live and read it yourself. We're going to give everybody 2 minutes apiece because we've got a ton of hands up here tonight. So 2 minutes a person to speak on this item. I just want to remind everybody again, under state law, this is not something that the town of Corte Madera can vote yes or no on. So what the purpose of this discussion here tonight is to get everybody's feedback and kind of together, all of us formulate basically our vision to present to the county of here's what makes this project successful in Corte Madera. So what we're trying to do is basically aggregate everybody's ideas and concerns so that we can basically put this into a document, and then go to the county with our task force and say, hey, so here's everything that residents of Corte Madera are thinking about this project. How can we act on these things and make it work? So that's what we're looking for here today. That's I think just kind of advising how one's time might be most effectively used. And again, you may not want to repeat, use your time repeating things that other folks have said, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of folks with the same kind of thoughts and questions about this. So with that, I will shut my mouth and we'll go ahead and start taking public comment now. And we're going to start with Steve and then go to Kristen next. And Steve, I'm just asking you to unmute here.
How's that?
There you go.
Okay. Everybody I've talked to that's lived around any of these home key operations has said that the crime has just skyrocketed in the neighborhood. And I want to know who's going to be responsible for that and who's going to be monitoring the residents in there. And if these people are affected with COVID-19, who's going to see that they're quarantined and they're not out running around the public. And also, I think this is going to be the end of Marin Joe's because people aren't going to want to go down there and park their car out in front of this place and have it broken into all the time. It's a tragedy if we lose Marin Joe's. It's been there forever.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Okay.
We're going to go to Kristen next and then Joe.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi there, I have made a couple of previous public comments. I just wanted to add a few more things. One is that several items that are on the FAQ that you discussed earlier today and several items that have been on record in these meetings have actually not been accurate and have been identified even with some of the county folks as not being accurate. A couple of those are the ADA inaccessibility. So when I did look at the plans for the new renovation, there's one unit that is ADA accessible. The other 16 are not. The 18th is actually the only place where there is a kitchenette, which is the manager's space right now, and the only place that has any kind of laundry facilities. There's no outside meeting space. There's no outside space for folks to go. Plus, again, if we think about the majority of these folks being disabled, there's one unit that actually would be satisfactory for them and actually give them that kind of accessibility. So that's one concern that I have about the folks that would be staying there. Another is that the Novato property that the county has been engaging with, as well as the Corte Madera one, is actually the same owner and is the only owner of motels in Marin County that actually did reach out to the county and saying that they want to sell. So that's something else that I don't think was really disclosed. Also, according to their application, and many of the pieces of the application for the Corte Madera site have not been on the website yet, but they did say that they're very close to public transportation and within a half a mile, and that's actually not true. They are further than a half mile. They are a mile away from any kind of supermarket, any kind of drugstore, any other kind of healthcare. And lastly, they listed on their application very specifically several times, quote, as with other programs that follow Housing First practices, there will be no rules or barriers relating to sobriety, good behavior, or justice system involvement.
Thank you, Kristen. And if you have any more to say, please feel free to email publiccomment@tcml.org. We're going to go next to Joe and then Scott.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I live just up the street on Meadow Sweet from this, so this definitely hits pretty close to home. And I appreciate the time and attention you guys have paid to this. This has really happened to this community. And I know that you guys are it's happening to you. We're not really making this happen. And so I appreciate the task force ideas, but will it have any teeth given the fact that this has just kind of happened to us? Is there any reason to believe that we will have any power here? And what are our realistic options given what's happened so far? The trust in the county is kind of eroded here a little bit. And then the only other question I have is with respect to mental health and potential drug use. I saw what the FAQ listed. It didn't eliminate those as possible residents. And actually it did mention mental health, but it'd be nice to know what kind of mental health issues are they admitting in there? And are they specifically not admitting drug offenders or sex offenders? It's really important to those of us with families. I mean, is Megan's Law going to be implemented with these folks? You know, I've got 3 little kids right up the street. We want to make sure that they're safe. So that's it for me. Thank you guys, and appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Joe. We're going to go to Scott and then Kate.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, first off, I just want to reiterate what I've said in prior meetings. I do support finding appropriate, and I'll underscore appropriate, housing for the homeless in Corte Madera, and I know others that I've talked to feel that way as well. So this is not a NIMBY issue, but we have issues based on many of the comments that were already made. I also just want to quickly say that I've met with Adam and spoken to Todd. You guys have been really great. So I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to listen to what we have to say. It's really been wonderful working with you guys. Todd, I wanted to add two things to your list that you had showed at the beginning. The first is, and you touched on this briefly, I do think it's really important for this task force to have some say in the screening of residents. I know there is concern on the part of the county to divulge private information, but I do think setting broad criteria would be incredibly valuable. For instance, not letting people with serious criminal backgrounds, not letting people who have known sexual or predatory type issues. So I think having some sort of screening process really needs to be considered strongly. I also like your point about giving some sort of priority to people who are unhoused that live in Corte Madera. The second point is I really think we should establish success criteria a priori. So set them up front and say, look, these are the 5 or 6 measurable things that we're going to monitor over the next 6 to 12 to 24 months. And if this project doesn't live up to it, then the county agrees to potentially shut the project down. There's a lot of fear of the unknown, and I'm the first to admit that that's probably where I am as well. But there's also been a lot of promises made. This won't affect your home values. The crime will not go up. But without seeing this thing evolve, it's difficult for us to know and trust. So I think setting those criteria up front, making them very specific and measurable, and then having points at which we could measure that, and then decide if this is working, I think it gives us the opportunity to set a real best practice here. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to go to Kate and then Barbara.
Hi there. Okay, so my concerns are mainly around the screening process. You know, I do have experience living nearby this kind of population, and I can say that, you know, I had to call 911 several times because I was followed, my life was threatened, you know, and the police would come out, and ultimately there was nothing they could do, so I stopped calling. And that's, you know, that was the situation with a lot of my neighbors. You know, our quality of life was low because of our neighbors, and there wasn't anything the police could do. So I wouldn't count on there not being a lot of calls for help for like burglaries as a good thing. I felt unsafe regularly until I was able to move away. I am very concerned that there is no clear path for ongoing funding, and you can't guarantee us that the cost of this shelter and maybe 2 or 3 years when this is long-term housing or whatever, that it's not going to fall on Corte Madera. I mean, I'm very, very concerned about that. And when we talk about, you know, answers to our questions about it, there's a lot of we're hoping to, or the plan is, or ideally it's XYZ, and there's no definitive this will happen. So that's really, you know, it doesn't help us feel secure in supporting this project. And, you know, again, it sounds like our homeless population, first of all, it won't be prioritized, but secondly, I don't even know if they'll qualify, because it sounds like if they have a car, they don't qualify. So it seems as though we're going to be inviting homeless people from outside the community into Corte Madera. And then if they choose not to stay at the shelter, they're going to be on our streets. So we're going to increase our homeless population. I'd like to know more about that. I don't understand it. And you know, we need more information.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. I'm sorry, that's your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Barbara next, and then to Tess.
Hi. I have a question, more of a comment, that it seems that these projects, I live over near the San Clemente project, which is fine, but it's buildings and homes. This is motels, and I have a question as to why it seems that apparently only Corte Madera and Novato in this time, or or typically San Rafael. What about Kentfield? There's Sir Francis Drake or Sausalito. I would feel more comfortable if I knew that other communities were stepping up. So that goes to, I had hoped somebody from the county would be here to answer these questions as to why they decided on, partially this was answered, but why only motels and why only typically San Rafael, Corte Madera, and Novato only. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. We're going to go to Tess next and then Lynn.
Hi there. One thing that really concerns me is that there's no real concern about the residents in the area from the perspective of 1 out of 5 women have been sexually assaulted, right? Those are statistics, hard statistics. I am one of those 5 people, and I was raped by a homeless person, held captive and kidnapped for years, and I live on Meadow Suite. To think that there's going to be a homeless facility down the street when I was raped by a homeless man who had mental illness that I had to put away to prison for 10 years after he was discovered to be, not mentally sound, is beyond alarming. There are children in this area. There is, as you have said in all of the public comment, that these people are going to have mental illness. It seems ill-fitted for the area. It seems absolutely fast-tracked to try and grab dollars. And then you make comments about property taxes, about what about our homes? What about these homes that will be dropping in value because now we will have to disclose that these are down the street. I will sell as fast as I can. I cannot live and be tortured like this with this facility going in. And I just feel like this is just, again, ill-fitted for the community and really blindsided by thinking that this is a good fit for our area.
Thank you, Tess. We're going to go to Lynn next and then Katie.
Hi, thank you. Oh, Tess, your story gave me chills, and I'm sorry to hear it. Thank you for taking public comment. I have to say it's a little bit frustrating to make comments, but not, kind of superficially feel heard, but not get answers. A couple of things that are concerning me immediately is that you're saying Catholic Charities has been identified. I don't know if they're solidly in. It's gone from being called supportive housing in a period of just a week and a half to now being called interim housing. And the period between now and spring or summer, when the remodels were to be done to turn that into long-term housing under Homeward Bound's wing, is now being referred to, in a couple of years. So I think we absolutely need clarification there. To Tessa's point, for the proximate residents, whether they have young children or are seniors living alone, if the county is willing to walk on some property taxes, how about subsidizing security cameras for proximate residents, video cameras? And I'm actually really quite serious about this because I support housing unhoused people and have only the highest regard for Homeward Bound. I don't think this is like King Street, but I am very concerned for my security and the security of people like Tess and Scott's family and everybody who lives very, very close. And I don't feel we've been heard.
Thank you, Lynn. We're going to go next to Katie and then Dan.
Hi, I'm a single mother living on Meadow Sweet, and I have 2 daughters. We've been living here for 20 years, and we've seen the neighborhood change. And I've appreciated some of the thoughtfulness around the quotes. I have noticed that they don't really compare to experience that we have had in the area with the homeless. We have had police over at our house many times because we've had a gentleman that has learned the names of my kids and been calling them from the street. And this went on for several years, such that he followed her to school all the way till Mill Valley. And so I view this as a real security issue. I will not live in an area where my kids are at risk, where they can't play in the driveway, even if I can see them. And I do know that the property value will go down regardless of what Trulia says, because that's not an accurate portrayal of what goes on in Marin County. People move to Marin County because they want to feel safe and they want to have their kids go to our schools. So I think it's really important to consider that while maybe men feel safe much more often than women do, women often throughout their days feel safety issues come up. We're more aware of it. And certainly when you have situations like this arise, it makes it all the more of a security situation that we definitely will not be able to live with.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
We're going to go next to Dan and then Patty.
Hi, how's it going? My name's Dan. I spoke at the last call, so I want to make this as quick as possible. But first and foremost, I wanted to talk about some of the concerns that I have regarding the timelines of this project. One, it was mentioned earlier that the timeline was really condensed due to COVID. There were some issues surrounding that. One thing that really stood out to me was the fact that not only Marin Joe's, who's been in business for 70 years, had to find out via an article in the Marin Independent Journal that no notification was sent out to a community of 9,800 people that's only 2 miles across at its widest point. Furthermore, during the first meeting that we had with the county, we hammered the point over and over again that no county notification was being sent out, no city notification was being sent out. To date, only 360 notifications have gone out to the residents surrounding this property in question. Now, I want to point out the fact that this is to, most of these notifications went out to an apartment complex. Now, as somebody who is a first-time homeowner, first-generation immigrant to this country, I want to tell you that, when you are renting month to month and potentially on public housing, you are not as invested in the community. And the fact that, you sought to slight the 9,800 people that live in this town as being not affected by this, it was very questioning. The second question I had was, who is going to be housing this? During the last couple calls, we asked a lot of very specific pointed questions. A lot of times we were told that this would be COVID related, 65 plus, then we told it was not going to be 65 plus. Long story short, we were told that these individuals would be decided upon by a secret committee using secret criteria. This just doesn't stand up. Also, another thing that was mentioned was that 75% of the homeless individuals in our population end up being homeless within the population that they're raised. That's simply not the case in all of the coastal cities in California, Oregon, and Washington. The majority of the homeless individuals that are here in Marin are not residents of Corte Madera. And the fact that there are currently 37 unhoused individuals on the streets of Corte Madera, many of whom are currently living in RVs and cars that won't be considered for this, I think is disheartening. And the fact that we're looking to increase our social problems by importing these problems outside is also troubling.
Thank you,
Dan. In terms of the safety statistics,
Dan, I'm sorry. We're limited to 2 minutes per person.
Okay, let me just make one quick comment. 1 second. So, as
Dan, I'm really sorry, Dan. We can't give one person more than another.
9,800 individuals within Corte Madera. Why are you then prioritizing 18 individuals above us? That's my
Thank you,
comment.
Dan. Okay, thank you. We're going to go next to Patty and then Lisa.
Good evening. I have lived on Casa Buena since 1979, before it was even part of Corte Madera. And I think we have a very reasonable ask, and that is to increase safety, especially for pedestrians, if we're going to be increasing the number of pedestrians. And that is to have lighting and a sidewalk on Casa Buena. It's a real hazard. If you go past Marin Joe's heading south, if you turn your headlights off on your car, it is pitch black. You can't see any pedestrian, and there are hills. So you're blind hills that make it even more hazardous. And I think it's very reasonable to have the county help us with adding lighting and a sidewalk so that we're not asking for more trouble. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. We're going to go to Lisa and then Thomas.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Lisa Levitt, and I'm a pediatrician at Marin Community Clinics. The clinic is a member of the Marin Organizing Committee, and I want to strongly support the purchase of 1591 Casa Buena Drive in Corte Madera for first interim and then permanent supportive housing. I want to tell you the story of my 12-year-old patient who came to see me for her physical exam in October. I will call her Sarah. She told me that she was living with her aunt so that she would have internet to do her online 7th grade Zoom class and her homework. Her parents recently moved into an RV in order to save money. Her parents had lost their jobs due to COVID and had to give up their family apartment because they could no longer afford it. My patient did not offer this information initially. She is not one to complain. She told me that she tries to hide her family situation and does her best to fit in and get by. I can confirm that this family is not a safety risk. They are just down in their luck and need a safe and warm place to house together as a family until they can get back on their feet. So many of my patients are community members or teetering on the edge of homelessness due to the economic crisis brought about by this pandemic. Many have lost their housing and are living in precarious situations, as we know, sleeping in their cars, camping at a local park. Common human decency and public health requires that we find a solution to get people indoors. Housing is medicine, and I want to repeat that again. Housing is medicine, which is even more critical during a global health crisis. With winter coming on and spikes in coronavirus emerging across the nation, creating housing makes sense. As we've heard, Corte Madera has 39 homeless individuals. The 18 units of supported housing proposed would go a long way to addressing the need for housing and reaching the goal of ending homelessness in Marin.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you on behalf of my patient, Sarah, and many others like her.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Thomas next and then James.
Good evening, council members. I am Pastor Thomas Gable, and I serve Marin Lutheran Church on Meadow Sweet Drive. We are a member of Marin Organizing Committee. I strongly support the purchase of 1591 Casa Buena Drive for first transitional and then permanent supportive housing. The purchase of this building will provide several benefits. It will provide a safe place for formerly homeless residents to shelter in place during COVID-19. Second, it will help the county reach its goal of ending homelessness in Marin by providing 18 units of permanent supporting housing. Finally, it's likely that these units will count towards Corte Madera's very low income requirements for the next regional housing needs allocation cycle. While I have heard the residents' concerns about crime and safety around this housing, neither Larkspur, which has created supportive housing for 12 formerly housing residents right downtown, nor Fairfax, which has housed 11 formerly homeless residents in a residential section of town, have experienced an increase in crime related to this housing. At the time of the last point-in-time homeless count, as we've heard, Corte Madera has 39 homeless individuals. These 18 units of supportive housing proposed at 1591 Casa Buena Drive would go a long way towards addressing the needs for housing in our community. Please collaborate with the county and Opening Doors Marin to make this dream a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. We're going to go next to James and then Lucinda. James, looks like you are unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I guess listening to this all, I'm concerned with mission creep or the fact that the long-term goal, which is finding long-term housing, seems to be slipping away. And what I would suggest doing is, if they do go ahead with this, only put in, for half the units, populate them with the future long-term residents. The other half of the units, which are empty, immediately start renovating them so that they will be suitable for long-term housing. Then shift the residents into the newly renovated units and repeat in the now empty units. And this will get the project done and finished soon. Otherwise, what we could have is, well, we'll provide temporary housing. In 10 years from now, it'll still be temporary because we're running at Marin County's daylight standard time, which is nothing ever gets done, but they study it to death. So that's my suggestion.
Great, thank you. We're going to go next to Lucinda and then Elizabeth.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to raise a couple of questions with regard to the number of units that they say 18 are in this project, but won't one of those be allocated to the residential manager? And what about these other providers that are going to be 24/7? Are they going to live on premise? Would they be part of the allocation for the residentials? That's one point. Next one is I would like to follow up on the goals that one of the previous speakers mentioned. And I think those goals and objectives need to be very measurable, and they need to be reported out to the constituency of Corte Madera on a regular basis. Number three, I'm very concerned about the finances that the town will lose. I think that we need to incorporate that in part of what we require from the county. And that's not just now and for the next couple of years, which is what I heard is where the county then steps out and Corte Madera would have to step in. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I've understood. I think it needs to be ongoing because it's taking away earning power for the town, which affects all of us. Lastly, it's the crime factor that was mentioned, and my heart goes out to Tess. I cannot imagine, but I am a senior and I am alone. I am out. I cannot worry about my safety. That's why I've lived in this beautiful town for 50 years. And if this is going to be an issue going forward, mental health, sexual, I don't care what it is. I do not want criminals in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucinda. We're going to go to Elizabeth next and then Ruth.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here and putting on this forum for us. Just want to note, Adam, you've been lovely to work with, and I really appreciate the support that you've given to the community as soon as this whole thing started. And Todd, I've been very impressed and encouraged by definitely your statements tonight and how proactive you're being with the community. So I want to thank you guys both for that. So a few quick comments here, Todd, probably to add to your list. Many of the questions that are on the Q&A, some of them are inaccurate or they lead to not super supported, well-supported information. So I think we would ask that the county be responsible for making sure that all residents feel that their questions are being answered. So that's one thing that that's an ask I would like to have. Another is this facility is on Casa Buena. I'm very concerned that it's not suitable for a homeless population. So I think it would call for a redesign. I don't think 18 units as for permanent housing is feasible. That seems like a very, I don't know, it's almost like making someone live in a jail cell. Those are really, really tiny units. I would rather reduce the number of the units, but make them more pleasant and enjoyable to live in. And then also, I know that some security has been given. It hasn't been a sure commitment. As a resident, I do live on Meadow Suite. My husband and I just spent our life savings on our house here. We're very love the community. We'd like to have 24-hour security so that we can continue feeling safe and loving the community. And then lastly, I think there have been a lot of comments about Casa Buena, but also concerned about the walkable access to the freeway, especially for mentally ill people. So a stronger barrier to the freeway.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. We're going to go to Ruth next, and then Carmen.
Thank you. As I listened to the speakers before me, I was struck by how different their fears are from my experience as a volunteer at Mill Street Homeless Shelter. Before COVID stopped the program, I went to Mill Street once monthly with my congregation to serve Sunday brunch to the residents. Part of the program was sitting with the residents to share breakfast. I met many wonderful men and women, not one of whom I was frightened by. Homeless individuals aren't unhoused because they're bad. They're unhoused because of job loss, have had medical problems, or made poor job decisions. They are not bad or inherently unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. We're going to go next to Carmen and then Catherine.
Good. Okay. Hi, this is Eric. I'm actually using Carmen's computer. And I want to say that I strongly object to this project that's being put forward here. And it seems like the board or the town council and everyone is assuming this is a done deal and there's nothing you can do about it. Listening to the community comments, it seems like most people are significantly opposed to this thing going through. You guys are still on board with, we got to do it. It's going to happen. There's nothing we can do. You know, people brought up Novato's resistance, Milpitas's resistance. Has the town attorney been consulted about what legal avenues are available to us to move forward, to do something about this? I mean, I don't think it's a fit for the community whatsoever. We're a small town. We're not like San Rafael that you can afford to have homeless wandering around the streets. So have you guys ever entertained any possible alternatives to going forward with this? Has the attorney discussed this with you? And if so, what options do we have? Because I don't think the town wants it, and you shouldn't be trying to push it forward and making it seem palatable to them when everyone doesn't want it. So I hope you at least look at that. Because like someone else said, you're putting the interests of 18 people over the community of 9,800, and that's not right. And also there's a ton of these top-down legislator mandated project things coming our way too. And if we don't put up some resistance now, they'll feel they can have their way anytime they want. So I think we should take a stand now and do something about it if we can, like Milpitas has. So anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to Catherine next and then Roy.
I feel the same way that this gentleman felt. I think that Milpitas, and I sent a long email to you, so it should be in your records. But my question is, for one thing, I'm glad that King Street has not been mentioned too much, because I think Corte Madera would love to have something like King Street here. No wonder there is zero police going there, because they're senior citizens who had to have been highly vetted. It's across the street from a school. I've toured it. There's no alcohol. It's a long-term, very long-term lease that I'm sure there are several clauses to get out of it if anything happens there. So to just leave King Street out of this altogether, I think you guys, you have to consider how people are feeling. I am adjacent to, on Meadow Suite, adjacent The first notification I received was Friday. My husband ran into someone on Thursday who lives right up the street on Meadow Suite. She's like, what? What's happening? So many people haven't heard about this. And I just am hearing tonight that you sent it to 300 people. The rest of the people don't even know, because this does not just affect Meadow Suite or Casa Buena. It's affecting every shopping center here and the whole town. So I think that they should all know what is going on here. And I'd like to know too, Adam, who are the residents that you met with? I mean, you can't be closer. There might be a wall between us, but who did you meet? I don't even know. Is anyone answering these questions we're asking? Because things have changed. I was here, I only saw the 19th Zoom meeting. And at that time, like, so many things have changed since then. And I'm not sure, has Homeward Bound or the Catholic Charities committed? At that time, they had not even committed to this. Anyway, there are a lot of questions that have to be answered. And safety, I'm finished now, but read my email.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Catherine. And I just want to reiterate for folks that this is public comment, so we can't do a back and forth with you guys right now. We're just taking all the public comment, and then once this wraps up, we'll bring it back and try to, with staff, kind of touch on all of the major points that were raised here as part of our discussion. And with that, we're going to go to Roy and then Michael.
Good evening. It's absolutely imperative that we don't have a reduction in services provided by the town due to a loss of revenue. I mean, we're going to lose the occupancy tax, property tax, and probably some sales tax. So that's item one. Item two, the Marin IJ had an article where the Marin supervisor, Judy Arnold from Novato, indicated it was time to withdraw from the Novato Hotel for the conversion to homeless, and that the Board of Supervisors was to cease negotiations. The primary reason is inadequate time for due diligence. And we're hearing this in spades tonight with the programs being renamed this and reconstituted that. I mean, that screams not enough time for due diligence. And I think the town manager made it very clear that there's not a lot of due diligence times. It's been forced on the town to take care of this. Third item, I've heard about Section 8 voucher dollars. What's the inflow from the vouchers going to be? What's the total aggregate amount? And then what's the outflow allocation of dollars? Are there going to be enough dollars there to compensate the town for the lost revenue? Last item is, I hope our supervisor from the 4th District, Dennis, actually joins in collaboration with Judy to say, let's halt this. We have to have more time to do due diligence so we make the right decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. We're going to go to Michael and then Ashley.
Yeah, hi. This is very frustrating because it appears we're being presented with a fait accompli. We really have no decision. I suspect that the few people that have spoken and supported this housing development don't live in Corte Madera. And you, as our representatives, whether it's city charter or not, we would look to you to listen to us to fight back against the county. And if we need to amend the city charter to try to prevent this from happening, or certainly happening in the future, then we need to do it. And as our representatives, we need you to push back against the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to go to Ashley and then Tanya.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
First and foremost, I would like to say I appreciate the county's efforts to combat homelessness in Marin County. I think this is a very important issue that should be addressed, and I'm glad it's finally getting addressed. Now, while stating that, I am a resident on Meadow Suite Drive, and I'm approximately like a 2-minute walk away from the location, from the Corte Madera location that this internment home would be built. I have a few concerns though. I think that the location should be reconsidered for the reason that I find it a little bit concerning that it has been placed in an area where there are majority of minorities and low-income people who have already faced a lot of systemic issues and difficulties, let alone there are a lot of danger and crime here. I personally, my family owns a truck and we live in these apartments, and it has been broken into about 2 or 3 times. I think we should take into consideration the types of people who will be let into these homeless shelters, as while mental health is a very serious issue and also can be related to homelessness, I think it should be important as to how that will be addressed. For example, I walk my siblings, who are both 8, one is 8, the other is 6, to school and back every day. If I encounter someone with a mental health issue who is, you know, in a time of difficulty or in a time of an emotional stress, if I encounter that, who do I call? Because as we have seen previously, a lot of police officers are not equipped with how to deal with mental health issues. So I think we need more resources and to take into consideration, if people with mental health issues are being admitted into these homes, what we can do as a community to help the residents who live near. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. We're gonna go to Tanya next and then Stephen. And Tanya, if you just unmute, you can go ahead and start talking. Okay, Tanya, looks like you're unmuted, so we should be able to hear you. I think we're having some technical difficulties there. Tanya, I'm gonna go ahead and disable your talking here. Hopefully you can get that figured out. Go ahead and raise your hand again if you're able to get that straightened out, and we'll bring you back on here. But in the meantime, we're gonna go to Stephen and then to Supervisor Rodoni. Are you there, Stephen?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time tonight. I'm gonna try not to just be a dead horse here. Many of my concerns have already been echoed, but a few things I just really do want to highlight. And the biggest one is just the complete and utter lack of transparency throughout this whole entire process from day one to now. The plan keeps changing, the timelines keep changing, the population keeps potentially changing. We don't know. I don't think you guys really know. And that's really unfortunate. You know, the county has said, oh, we want to make renovations to the site so there's more communal areas and there's more common spaces, because currently there are none. These are 18 individuals who may have issues, may not have issues, could be unhoused for whatever reason, but this is a 130 square foot space. I cannot expect that these individuals are just going to spend 24 hours a day in that space. And yes, they're going to go to jobs and do other things, but people need other things to do, and they can't just loiter in the parking lot or loiter at Marin Joe's or loiter at the town center. But how can you trust, based on the lack of transparency that we've encountered so far, that any of those things the county is promising are actually going to happen, that they're actually going to make these renovations? We've talked about, oh, maybe we can build a wall on the freeway so we can avoid the unfortunate circumstance of someone walking onto the freeway and getting hit by a car. There's freeway access on that street right there. But I do not have any faith, and I don't think many of you do either, that will happen based on everything that we've heard from the county so far, and the, again, utter lack of transparency. And so at the end of the day, it feels like this is setting a precedent where 2 years from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, who knows, something else happens. Maybe it's even worse than, to some of us, maybe it's even worse than this. But there's, again, nothing we can do about it. So I think that's something we really need to look at and consider and figure out ways to fight back.
Thank you, Stephen. We are actually going to go to Kate next, and then Jan.
Hi there. I just want to reiterate, you know, there's 9,800 residents in Corte Madera, and only 300 and something were notified via mail for this. And and the majority of them were in apartments. But my point is, you know, to echo, the lack of transparency throughout this process has been just atrocious. And it's been very difficult to follow what is actually going to happen. And in hearing from the people from Homeward Bound, I mean, you know, as someone who found out this late in the game, I watched all the videos, I've read all the articles, I've listened to all the things. You practically need a master's degree to follow it all and figure out the answers to any questions. And when we talked to the Homeward Bound people, they were dodging the questions. They don't have a plan. There is no coherent plan. None of the community trusts their answers. I don't trust the town council. And it doesn't really sound like anybody's behind this. What do we do at this point? I feel like, you know, I've participated in a few of these, I've raised my concerns, but it seems like it's just moving forward. I feel powerless. And through this process, I actually feel very violated. I am feeling unsafe with my representatives, not going in a direction to keep the community feeling comfortable, safe, and taken care of. And that's what your guys' jobs are. You guys are here to represent us. You're here to take our voices to the other people in the county and to help represent us. And I feel violated. That's the only word I can think of. I feel unsafe with people in charge who don't seem to be taking safety first and who don't seem to be concerned about communicating in an effective way. It's very concerning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. We're going to go to Jan next and then Jim.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. My name's Jan O'Brien, and I'm a resident of Corte Madera. We own our home at 77 Granada, and we've been here for 25 years. I'm a member of the Mount Tam United Methodist Church, which is a member of the Marin Organizing Committee and a registered voter. And I strongly support the purchase of 1591 Casa Buena Drive in Corte Madera for first transitional, then permanent supportive housing. As a member of my church, I ran the REST program for years, serving meals throughout the rainy season. Many of the men grew up here in Marin, and they were very grateful to have a meal and a place to sleep. But the next day we put them back out on the street and let them fend for themselves. Without actual housing and support, they could not restart their lives. I think we must do better, and this would be a very good start. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. We're going to go to Jim next and then Leslie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I was curious. I think this is great in the framework that Todd was putting together to present to Marin County and saying, look, this is what success looks like, and we really need you to buy in. But what is the alternative if Marin County says, you know what, we really don't want to buy into all of these things and we really can't support all of these initiatives? As a town, what's our recourse at that point where they won't even entertain our point of view on this and how we want to see this enabled in our own communities? And to me, that doesn't seem right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to go to Leslie and then Kelly.
Good evening. Thank you. I actually do live in Corte Madera, and I've lived here since 1982. I have a fair amount of experience in our community as well as in Southern Marin, including housing issues like the Fireside in Tam Valley and San Clemente Place here in Corte Madera. And I come to this issue with a great deal of respect for all sides and appreciation for the staff's very thoughtful approach. I got into this a little bit late, as I think a lot of people have, because it's a tight timeline, but I've read all of the staff reports. I've watched all of the meetings that have been held where the information actually has been shared and explained in great detail. Ashley McIntyre, I think from the county, has been extremely open. She's been available, and she's been very clear about how this process has moved more quickly than anyone would like, and yet very clear about what the decisions are that still need to be made, and in collaboration with communities. So I want to say that I am fully in favor, and I support approving the Home Key program in Corte Madera. Housing is medicine. Like others who have spoken earlier this evening, I too have taken the time to prepare and serve meals to homeless people, have sat with them and eaten with them and heard their stories. These people, these homeless people we are considering are really like everyone else. They are visible only because they are unhoused. They are us. We all know aggressive neighbors. We have friends who have addiction issues or relatives with emotional or mental challenges. The difference is that they have resources that protect them. The people we're talking about are often one paycheck away from a disaster, and disaster struck, COVID, and their lives spiraled down. There is little statistical data to support the concerns about more crime or lower property values and the other concerns that people have expressed, but they're legitimate fears and we need to talk about them, and I respect people's worries. But I've walked around Corte Madera early in the morning and I've seen people who might not be
Thank you,
sleeping later
Leslie.
in the morning. Okay, I'll
Thank
email.
you very much. Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, it's 2 minutes per person. Thank you, appreciate it. We're gonna go to Kelly next, and then Barbara. And Kelly, if you just
Can you
unmute,
hear me?
there you go. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Hi, thanks for doing this tonight and taking other people's opinions and mine as well. I wasn't planning on speaking, but after hearing so many other people, and then particularly the one gentleman who said he has not heard many people in favor of this, I just had to say something. I'm very much in favor of having this in our community. I personally have gone through the Homeward Bound program in San Rafael. I have never had a drug problem. I have never had an alcohol problem or any substance abuse problem at all. My issue was that I had no money and I had no family around me. I had limited education to get a job, and I was a brand new single mother. So, I mean, you can imagine that other people can be in that situation, and particularly now with COVID, I personally know 3 people who own their own homes and condos who are about to lose their homes and condos. It's just a terrible thing. The one thing that I did hear that I was in support of, I think it would be a great idea to add a sidewalk and more lighting down Casa Buena, as well as a wall along the freeway. But if you have case managers on site, living on sites, and if you have case managers that are responsible and watching out for the people, if you have requirements of sobriety, no drugs, no alcohol allowed on the premises, nor having intake of any of that for any of the residents, I'm fully in support of all of this. You can't go wrong. If you are homeless, if you are living in your car or about to live in your car or living on the street, it doesn't matter the size of the property or the building or the room. It really
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're going to go next to Barbara and then David.
Sorry. I just want to say, I'm sorry. I've lived in Corte Madera for 27 years. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've lived in Corte Madera for 27 years, and I am embarrassed by the representation by the town council. I don't think you represent your constituents at all. Where are all the emails that people sent about like objecting to this? Where are all the emails that are objecting to this? I mean, why are you like ignoring that most people are opposed to this? Because you guys are like in favor of it. But I'm sorry, it's like, it makes me not trust the town council or anybody in the town council. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Thank you, Barbara. We're going to go next to David and then Tanya.
Hello all, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my comment assumes, for all the legal reasons that have been explained, that this is a done deal if the county wants to move forward. And it just seems to me that the one thing that would make this a win-win in some ways, in subtle ways, is good landscaping. Both Marin Joe's and the adjacent apartment buildings, if there was mature landscaping on the sides, mature landscaping in the front, some reconfiguring of the parking lot since cars are not going to be coming and going for the residents. I just think that that's a win-win. And also to reiterate what Patty said, lighting and sidewalk. So to the extent that, we can get some grant money from the county to assist with that, or if it's possible, although unlikely, to impose upon the Home Key project really good landscaping, that would be, I think, a win-win for everyone. And then just finally, I know this was dumped on everyone with a very short timeline. And from my perspective, the town's outreach has really been outstanding. The use of the website, the weekly Corte Madera Chronicles, the social media notices on Nextdoor and Facebook, the use of the town's reader board, everything that you're doing, I think in this short amount of time shows that the town council, the town management, planning, everyone has been reaching out as well as can be done in a short amount of time. And my family, for one, appreciates it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, David. We're going to go to Tanya next and then Dan. And Tanya, you are unmuted. So hopefully if you speak, we can hear you. I think we're still having some technical difficulties there, unfortunately. Tanya, I'm going to take you back down. I guess we can give it one more try. If you're able to get that straightened out, go ahead and put your hand up again, and we will try and get you back on here. In the meantime, we'll go to Dan and then Emily.
Hey, thanks for taking the time. So to reiterate, the one thing that I'm really want you to take to heart is that all of you elected officials were put into power to represent the best interests of the 9,800 individuals who are already within the city of Corte Madera, who help every single day to make this town what it is today. There are community measures. Our town has an emergency response unit. Right now, you're prioritizing the 18 individuals from unknown origins above that of all of our community. Now, I realize that homelessness is a national problem, but I also want to reiterate that right now, Marin County has about 1,700 homeless people. 37 of those allegedly are within the city limits of Corte Madera. We are taking a disproportionate burden upon ourselves. And more importantly, as somebody who is a first-generation immigrant, as somebody who is the only member of my family in a non-multi-generational household, as somebody who has drug addiction, especially opiate addiction in my family, suicide, it is unethical for you to set these people up who by your own definition are most vulnerable in situations where they're unable to be successful. And by the Home Key and by the nonprofit's own definition, their primary definition of success is that people that are housed in these public housing programs stay housed in perpetuity. I do not see that as an accurate measure of success. What I would like to see as a measure of success is like the people in the San Clemente Street, like people in the one in Larkspur. How can these people reintegrate in society? How can these people find a sense of purpose? How can they work? How can they contribute to our society? And if there is no path to take these individuals from a situation where they're maybe in the depths of homelessness, suffering from mental illness, suffering from drug addiction, if there's no clear path to get them to the point where they can transition,
thank you very much.
You're failing. You are a failure.
Thank you.
Thank you, failure.
We're going to go to Emily next, and then Phyllis.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. My name is Emily Charlie, and I do live in Corte Madera as a single mother to a kindergartner. Admittedly, I am still a bit unclear as to all of the details, But generally, I am pleased that our community, whether voluntarily or not, is part of addressing the issue of homelessness. So understanding that the deal is largely done and to not repeat those before me, I have just 4 additional comments. First, integration of the residents. I imagine that homeless feel disconnected from society already. It's harder to be afraid of the known. So I hope that integration is a factor that somehow is under consideration. Second, someone before me mentioned sidewalks. I'd like to piggyback a little bit on that. I hope that there's corresponding increase in public transportation options and access there too, that those are also being considered. Third, to the extent there is still room for adjustment at all here, I'd like to voice my encouragement of any efforts geared towards maximizing ADA accessibility for as many units as possible. And finally, maybe this is not the time, but I feel it's important. I am opposed to screening for mental health. Dealing with mental health issues is a struggle that touches most families in America in some way. But that said, I appreciate the comments of my friends and neighbors. Let's take this opportunity to increase related services for those populations. Let's not shun them and make them feel unwelcome, but let's make sure that we have the available corresponding services. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. We're going to go to Phyllis next, and then Matt.
Mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I've been listening to what everyone has had to say, and on the one hand, I'd like to see us do something to do our part in adding to shelter for the homeless, on a permanent basis. This one is that it's going to be individual adults. And I wondered, is that a mixture of men and women? And it doesn't say. So that was one curiosity I had. I agree with having the sidewalks and some place for them to gather, and we don't have public transportation that's viable. So if they can get someplace by walking, then they can walk over to the town center, but it's not a great place. And I thought that these people were going to be more on the fragile side, it sounded like. And I would think they would need more help. If Homeward Bound is going to run it, for sure, and they will have their people there taking charge, I'm all for it. I think they do a really great job, but I don't think you have that assurance yet either. And this is coming down too much like ABAG coming in and saying, you will have X number of, 14,000 units in Marin County. And I forget what they were hitting Corte Madera with, but we know what happened the last time. And I don't trust government in that sense, because they come in and they start taking over, and then they say, you will build high-rise buildings here because you are going to have this many people that you are going to house. And they don't take into consideration the actual size of the community.
That was time.
Corte Madera.
Oh, sorry, Rebecca. I didn't see that there. Thank you,
Rebecca.
Phyllis. Thank you very much, Phyllis. And thank you, Rebecca. We're going to go to Matt next. And then we'll give Tanya one more try. And I see a few hands up from folks who have already spoken. I'm sorry, we can't bring people on here more than once. It's not fair to everybody else. So we're going to go to Matt next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for my time to comment. I've grown up in Corte Madera and I've recently returned to the county. And in the last month, I bought a house here in Casa Buena. I live here with my wife, my mother-in-law, and my young child, who's 2. I just wanted to second Mr. Cusimano's earlier comments about how much of a shame it is that how this project was initially pitched. I believe the county really shot itself in the foot, and it's very unfortunate that even with the rush timeline, the town and its residents weren't properly notified. I, like so many others, had to read about this in that IJ article as I was closing escrow on my home. So that was not fun, as you can all imagine. With that said, I just wanted to comment that providing supportive housing for our homeless residents is absolutely a moral and ethical responsibility for all of us who have the fortune to call Marin our home. And although it might not always seem this way, the homeless are members of our community and we must do all we can to help them. However, we also cannot let our town have no say in its future. And I think the recommendation laid out earlier by the council and Mr. Cusimano at the start of this are absolute imperatives. We have to make sure the town has a say in the running of this facility, and most importantly, the approval of application for residents. If the county is unwilling or unable to meet these extremely modest demands, in my opinion, then unfortunately, it's my opinion that we can't support this project the way it should be. In a previous meeting, the county said that they would not notify nearby residents if a sex or other violent offender moved into this facility. And that was somewhat of a big wake-up call for my family and I on how we have to kind of get involved. It's my opinion that the town needs to do whatever it can to provide support to the homeless members of our community while being sure to protect those who already have the fortune to call Corte Madera home. So thank you all, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Matt. We're going to give Tanya one more try here. Hopefully we can hear from her tonight. Alrighty, Tanya, you're unmuted again. All right, I'm sorry. It looks like we are having some technical difficulties here. Please go ahead and just email us, and the same goes to the folks who've already spoken live but have more to say. Please email public comment at tcml.org so that we can read the rest of your comments and make sure that they get into the public record here. We're going to go to Pat Ravazio next, and then to Supervisor Rodoni.
Hi, thanks so much, guys. Hey, listen, I just want to say, I know you are stuck in a very difficult situation. The state law is what got this whole process rolling. And those who are blaming the town council or the town manager or someone for the predicament we're in is really not taking the time to look at the reality of the situation. And I really think that our town needs to be a leader in this and support getting people off the streets. And I also think we need to push the case that this is the way to solve the housing dilemma, is to lift the bottom up and to find ways to serve those who are most in need and our most vulnerable populations, and stop building 85 or 90% market rate housing in order to eke out a little 10% sliver for those who need it. So as far as ABAG goes, and how Corte Madera addresses our home housing problem, I think taking care of this population is the most important thing to do. And I really thank all of you guys for your patience and your time and listening to everybody, even if you can't give everyone the answer they want to hear. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Pat. We're going to go to Supervisor Rodoni next, and then Peter, and it looks like that might be our last two comments of the night, unless some new folks raise their hands.
Mayor Beckman, thank you for allowing me to speak for a minute tonight. I just wanted to thank you and your council for hearing comments tonight. I didn't get here because I was at the Santa Fe City Council meeting on another issue tonight, but I did come in about halfway through, and I look forward to working with you and your city manager and council members on figuring out what success does look like for this location. And I really look forward to seeing if we can come to some agreement prior to us having to make a decision on the 10th of November. But I would mention, if it hasn't been mentioned before, that the marincounty.org/homekey website was set up last Friday, and it has a ton of information on it that residents should go and take a look at, because a lot of the questions that I continue to hear have been answered there. We may or may not have all the answers by the time we make this decision, but the more we have, the better we'll be. And that includes working with you and your staff to come up with some agreed upon going forward terms that we might want to talk about. I think a task force is something that's very possible. And I do want to hear more about what you think it would take to be successful. While no final decision has been made, it's still in the due diligence process. You know, we do need to conclude this by November 10th, unfortunately, and that's the time frame that we have. But thank you so much for doing this tonight, and thanks to the public and residents for making comments. And some were very good suggestions that I think will go a long ways if we move forward with this proposal. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. We're going to go to Peter next, and Peter may be our last comment here unless somebody else raises their hand who has not had a chance to speak yet.
Thank you very much, Council, for giving us the opportunity to express our opinions, especially since it seems like the town's got its hands tied in this matter. I really support the town giving the county some input on this process. My biggest concern, and I'd feel much better about this project if it wasn't such a fast track with a clear, more delineated plan. It just doesn't seem like it's fully vetted, and when you don't have firm commitments from entities like Homeward Bound and Catholic Charities already signed up, it just doesn't give a sense of trust. The one thing that I did read about that was that there's a covenant that's been added to other home key property purchases, and that is that the property remain used for homeless purposes for 50+ years. And where's the funding going to come from for the long term to make sure that a facility like this is funded for that period of time? I think that's a question that really needs to be asked. The county kind of responded in one of the meetings that, oh, well, we've always been able to fund it, but that's really, I think, something that seriously needs to be considered. Last consideration is, will the work that's currently happening right now at the inn, will that work be completed in time, and will they have occupancy in order for these people to actually occupy once escrow closes? Anyhow, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Peter. And we do not have any other hands up now from folks who have not already had a chance to speak here. Rebecca, did we receive any emailed public comments during this public comment session from people on the line?
We received 2 emailed public comments since the start of the meeting. 3, but one of those commenters spoke during the meeting. So I have 2 from people that have not spoken.
Okay, would you please read those 2, and then the entirety of all the emailed public comments, both tonight and previously, that we've received on this issue are in the public record as part of this meeting's record. So those are going to live in perpetuity as well. And
yes, actually, they are in 2 places on our website. They're in a link on the Town Council's webpage of public comment received after agenda publication, and also the agenda has been re-uploaded to the website, including a link to public comment that was received after the agenda publication and before the start of tonight's meeting. So that's already live on our website. All of the emails that were received for and against the project are all listed there for the public and the council.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Timing myself. The first one is from Claire McCamey, who says, "Dear council members, my name is Claire McCamey and I live at 134 Lagoma Street in Mill Valley. I'm a member of the Mount Tam Methodist Church, which is a member of the Marin Organizing Committee. I'm writing in enthusiastic support of the purchase of 1591 Casa Buena Drive in Corte Madera for transitional and then permanent supportive housing. Like many of my neighbors, I'm painfully aware that there is inadequate housing for many families living and working in Marin. It's unconscionable that in a region as wealthy as ours, we cannot ensure housing for our most vulnerable citizens, and the purchase of this property would be both a short-term safety measure and a longer-term solution for a small number of deserving families. The location is convenient to transportation and schools, and the support that it would be provided to residents could help them emerge from lives of uncertainty and terrible insecurity to lives they and anyone most certainly deserves. It's our moral responsibility to take this opportunity, and will be our legal responsibility to do so under the new RHNA requirements. While I appreciate that many in our community fear change, the dangers of living life without a permanent and secure residence surely trump any discomfort our community members may feel about this decision. The needs and worries are hardly comparable. I hope you will do the sensible and ethical thing by making this purchase and going forward with this wonderful project. It's the very least we as a community can do for those among us who are in need of this essential support as they work to reestablish some measure of stability in their lives. Sincerely, Claire McCamey, Mount Tam Methodist Church.
Thank you.
And the second one. Is from Jean Greenbaum, who says, as I listen to comments, I find it galling that men, including the men on the council, lecture those immediately impacted by the project when I am pretty sure their property values aren't at risk and they don't feel a fear being assaulted. It's great being magnanimous when you have nothing at stake. I hate to make this a gender issue, but consider your audience before you make cavalier statements and promises you can't keep when addressing the community's fears. Jean Greenbaum, Casa Buena Drive.
Thank you, Jean. And thank you, Rebecca, for reading those. At this time, there are no other public comments, so we're going to close public comment. We'll bring it back to the staff first to touch on any points that they may want to speak to that were raised by members of the public, and then to the council for discussion and ultimately direction to staff on how we might be able to formulate a response here to the county. Before we get started here, I just want to thank all the residents who joined us tonight to share their public comments. That was a lot of folks who took the time to participate and get involved. We really appreciate it. I also want to especially thank those of you who shared very personal or vulnerable experiences with us, specifically Tess, Kelly, and others. That's very brave of you guys to share with us and to share with the community what you've been through, and we appreciate you coming out here and taking the time to share your experiences and your perspectives with us. And our hearts are with our residents for the struggles that they've been through. So thank you for coming out here and for trusting us with your stories. And with that, Todd and Adam, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll start off, and I'll start where I left off when I started this conversation. You know, I think what we're looking to do here is to provide feedback of what yes looks like for us. And what I'll say, and this is just your town manager, and if I need to be put in my place, put me in my place, but I think I speak on behalf of the council and this community that you don't get it both ways. You don't get to fast track a process and then do it your own way at the expense of the town. And I think we all here, we all feel the concerns of our community. Personally, I've served this community for 22 years. The safety of our community from a public safety standpoint has been at the top of my list, and I've given my life's professional experience of keeping this community safe. And so I would never make a decision of risking that safety and how I feel about the importance of doing things the right way. And when you look at what yes looks like for the town of Corte Madera, the process matters. And so what we're asking is not anything that is unfair or unrealistic. It's an expectation that if you want this to happen and you want our support as a community and as a town, that you will find a way to make it happen. And if November 10th is the deadline, then you will make that decision in writing before November 10th. And if not, that the town is going to have a serious problem with it. And we will look at all avenues available to us. That's how my approach as a town manager, that I think the expectation of this town council is. What I'll also say is that I respect the fast process that the county has also incorporated. We're all on the same page of trying to help our homeless community. It's interesting that we have a view of what homelessness looks like, and that makes me sad. I think if we put the expectations in place that we started with, that we've heard from our community, that are in our kind of 5-point plan that we started this meeting with, I think we're well on our way to having a really amazing project. What I heard from the community tonight that I haven't heard before, that I think has a lot of merit, that we really need to put our heads together, and if we want to move forward with our support under a certain criteria, is the measurables. I think that's absolutely necessary. As we have our working group and we think about this and we evaluate it, when we look at calls for service and crime or our concerns today from a year from now, we have to have measurables. And what does that look like? And so that really jumped out at me today. Losing revenue. Yeah, we're losing revenue, not just in $50,000 on an annual basis doesn't seem like a lot, but multiply that by 10, 20, 50 years, if that's the case, that's a big number. What I'll tell you is in this community, I've heard from community members that they feel like the towns maybe forgot about them in this specific neighborhood of Casa Buena and Meadow Street. And what I'll say to that area, to our neighbors, community members in this area, that over the next 3 years, led by Patty Stollier and others, is the sidewalks and a $3 million project that we have in our capital improvement plan to add lighting, to improve our streets, to improve safety, to add sidewalks all the way through that corridor leading up to the improvements we just did on Sanford. And so I think those are absolutely necessary, whether this project continues or not. We're committed to making this a better neighborhood. When you talk about crime, I can give you stats and I can talk to you for hours, but I'm just going to be talking out our residents, and I'm not going to do that. I think this is a much broader conversation. Mr. Mayor, we need to start talking about this at our community chats and educating ourselves and our community on what they look like. But again, it goes back to what our vision of homelessness is. You know, I know someone said, I think we have 30 something homeless individuals in our community. Well, if there's 18 long-term housing opportunities, let's find a way to make that happen. One of the conversations about sex registrants and sex offenders, I didn't really appreciate the response by staff at one of our workshops about that. That actually really bothered me, and I had a hard time not speaking to that at that meeting. What I'll tell you is when it comes to sex registrants and violators, it's a tough one. When it comes to crime, I'm staunch when it comes to that. And that's why I think we absolutely need to have a say in what our vision is of who we're trying to house in our community. If there's a fine line with that, but there's an expectation too. But when it comes to mental health, when it comes to, you know, some of the things we're talking about, I think we all just need to challenge ourselves to step back and think about what we're trying to do and what the actual vision of homelessness is, and what we're trying to accomplish. And it goes back to, what does yes and success look like for Corte Madera? There are people in our community that need help, that we need to step up and help them. I did not realize that the owners of this property are the same owners to Novato. I think it answers some of the questions of why Corte Madera. I did not know that until that was brought up tonight. And that's the other thing of a frustration of that we all have of trying to play catch up. So I don't look at this as us tonight, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, of us going, well, this is what our community wants. We have 5 expectations. Oh, we can only do 2 of them. Okay, well then that's just, we can't do anything. I do agree that the law is not on our side on this, but if that's the expectation and what the direction is to us, that your town manager and staff, with our recommendation of the council would be, that's unacceptable, and let's fight it. You know, whatever tools are in our toolbox. I am not in that place today because I'm not there yet. I've been very impressed with Supervisor Rodoni from the perspective of when he's heard he was involved in our conversations. He stepped up, his staff engaged our staff. He started engaging the county staff to really problem solve what success looks like for Corte Madera. And so I am taking the stance of optimism that let's put our heads together through the mayor. I know the mayor has also reached out to Supervisor Rodoni, and take the great feedback from tonight and do the work over this week, because it sounds like we don't have that much time. But if we get to November 10th and the message is through the mayor, your town manager, our community, to the Board of Supervisors on the 10th, and it's just, well, the process is fast and I'm sorry, we can't meet your expectations for success. Well, then I think, you know, this conversation is going to continue, and it's going to be a different conversation. So I'm going to take one of partnership and collaboration to really solve an important issue in our community. I think we can get there. But I definitely, the stories that we heard tonight, it makes me proud of our community. We hear you loud and clear. This is a tough situation because of the process is moving so fast. This is normally an 8 to 18 month process, and we're doing this in 2 months. So that's why you don't get it both ways. I think if you're going to do it that fast, they really have to meet our expectations if they're fair. And I think our community has shared that tonight, and that would be my initial feedback from the staff perspective, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Todd. Adam, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to try to, answer some of the specifics perhaps that came up in questions. And obviously, again, some of this is more directed to the county staff, and I think from my perspective, I'm happy to pass all of this information and the questions that we heard. And obviously, there's a recording of this meeting. This will go to we'll make sure that the county staff has seen this, heard the questions, and expect them to respond to them. And in that regard, I do think that the county has been working on some of the questions. I can say, for example, my conversation with Ashley McIntyre last week, she was telling me, in fact, they were working as we spoke last week on the contract with Catholic Charities. I think that has been solidified. I don't know if it's actually the ink has dried, or so to speak, but I know that is is in place for the interim portion of the project. As to the permanent, I have to admit, I don't know. And so that's I think a good question, whether Homeward Bound, whether they have the same confidence that is the actual operator of this project forward. So I think we'll definitely pass that on. I thought the question about measurables was very good, and I think it's something that frankly could go as a starting point for the working group task force, along with the physical improvements to the site, which I also, again, this is coming out as of today. I do understand that they have identified, again, not final, but they've identified a potential funding source for physical improvements outside of the initial state funding for the purchase of the site, but additional monies to potentially do some landscape improvements. So I think that it's a local foundation that potentially could contribute some funds for that. And so again, these are sort of moving towards solidifying and towards real, actual in writing commitments. But I don't know if they're actually 100% there yet. But I am encouraged by the continual work. It's just, again, it's the fast pace in which we don't have all the answers that we want. I think there was a question about other communities, why just Corte Madera and Novato, and somebody would feel better if other communities were also stepping up. And I think there was one of the FAQs did talk about other communities, as Sausalito and Larkspur and others are stepping up to try to Fairfax to also address permanent supportive housing for homeless individuals and families. The 19th unit, so there is a 19th unit, which is the manager's unit, which is more of a housing unit that has actual facilities. So my understanding is that is the actual additional space that's not going to be occupied by homeless individuals. That would be the manager's unit. And then on the permanent basis. And so what else did I have? And I do want to address the noticing because that came up several times, I think, from some people. And so, this is something that's been an emphasis for us for many years now, and trying to make that do better. And I admit we were sort of as well caught off guard in trying to do what we could to sort of quickly schedule meetings and get folks up to speed with just informational sessions on projects. So we, typically informational sessions, we use our social media platform to get those out. And we do have a very robust, outreach through Nextdoor, through the Facebook page. I know Rebecca gave me some numbers last week that we reach over 7,000 of our residents through Nextdoor. We have about 8,000 folks that get our newsletter. Is that right, Rebecca? I just don't want to get that wrong. And then we did in this case, as of last week, and looking back, it would have been great if we could have done a paper mailer, because it sounds like some people, that's the way they get their mail. Get their notices. We've had mixed results on sort of mailer versus digital media. So we did both this last time, but we did notice every residence from the Sanford Meadowsweet intersection, basically to the south and east. So that includes all the residents on Casa Buena, Meadowsweet, Meadowcrest, all these sort of offshoots off of there, basically that entire hillside, which, however many that was, we felt that was the appropriate break point for a significant mailer. And I think I'm glad to hear that many people got that. But I think the combination of both is what we felt, is robust. And I think whatever we can do more, and we will in the future, try to again improve on our noticing. But I do think we sufficiently noticed as many people who are interested in this project through the variety of ways in which we get things out. And I think more and more people are getting their notices from Nextdoor and Facebook and the newsletter, and please do sign up. I mean, that's how we can most easily get you information in the future. Just sign up for email alerts and whatnot. So, and what else did we have? I think there were some questions I couldn't answer, but what is the recourse if the county doesn't follow through, things like that. There are big outstanding questions. I think I'd rather take the perspective that Todd took and say that's not an option. We have to ensure that there is follow through with any commitments that are made. So another question was about the funding. How much is coming in and out through the project-based Section 8 vouchers, and how much is coming in? We don't have that information in terms of actually what the rent levels are going to be set at. I think it's a good question. It ultimately comes down to essentially like a pro forma analysis of actually how they're going to operate this project site in terms of and what the project-based Section 8 vouchers actually support, how much it supports, and how much operating costs are. I think that will give us a good sense of long-term operations and long-term financing, which was another question that came up. How can we ensure that that is ongoing? But again, just information we don't actually have at this point. Those are the ones I had written down. If anybody had any others that that they would like to, that they wrote down that they would like us to follow up on, please let me know.
Adam, factual question, please.
Yep.
There were a couple of folks who raised the issue of how big the units are. And
yes.
Somebody quoted 150 square feet or something. Do you have a feeling for how big the 18 units are?
Our building official does. I don't at this point. I think that's probably about right. But I hesitate to sort of give you a definitive number. But I think Kristen did look at it, and maybe a couple of them did say it was 120 to 150. I heard today. I just haven't looked at the building plans to know for sure what that unit size is.
None of them has a kitchen, right?
Correct.
Except for the manager's unit.
Right.
Right, and so it sounds like the idea is that meals will be delivered. Well, they don't have kitchens. Well, it's interim housing, and then the process of converting it to permanent supportive housing, the units will get kitchens.
Yes, and all of that will have to obviously comply with the building code for habitable room size and all sorts of safety measures that are required as part of any approval of a residential dwelling.
Great, thank you, Adam. So at this point, I think we're ready to open this up to discussion from the council. I just want to reiterate for folks first that this is such a frustrating and kind of, in a way, unnatural position for us to be in, because this really, again, it's not a town project, it's a county project. And so we are here coming to you guys, coming to the community saying, tell us what you want us to ask the county for. That's what we're here for. So you guys have done a very good job of that. A lot of really good public comment tonight, a lot of great suggestions, great ideas, a lot of important questions raised that are going to need answers. And as you saw, a lot of these questions, we don't have the answers for you yet. And that, again, that's a bad situation to be in. And it makes us feel like dirt, because that's, we're not used to being in this position where we're, being, where we have to kind of discuss a project that's not ours to control. So, I'm trying to just remind everybody of the sort of context that we have here and the sort of framework that we're operating in here. It's tough, but as Todd and Adam and everybody said, I think the only way that we're going to be able to have any hope of getting this project, if it goes through, to something that's going to be acceptable for the community, is if we really collaborate hard as a community, and if we really all work together to make sure that we've got our asks lined up, so that we can then turn to the county and say, hey, we really, we need you guys to meet us halfway on this. We need these things so that this project can be acceptable to the community. So with that, I'm going to open this up for any council member that would like to start off our discussion here. Bob.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for articulating that, Eli. You're right. We're in a difficult position. We don't have a yes or no on this. And first, I wanted to thank everybody who spoke tonight. I know that was very difficult for a lot of people to speak, and I really appreciate it. I really listened to it, and thank you for doing that. It really helped put a perspective on this for me. And let me just add my perspective on this too, from my experience. I've been the town's representative on the homelessness committee for the last 3 or 4 years for the county, so I've been working closely with this. I've actually done the homeless count, I think 3 different times, where we meet at 5:30 in the morning in San Rafael, and we're assigned a geographic area and we count homeless people. I did it 1 year with a homeless person who was assigned to me, who would point out what cars had people living in them and how many people were living in them. So I have some familiarity with the issue, and I did Corte Madera 1 year, and we have a significant homeless population living here in Corte Madera. And I think we have an ethical and moral responsibility to do something about it and fix it and change it. One of the questions that came up was, why aren't any other Southern Marin communities being addressed with this? One thing that wasn't talked about too much tonight was there is a 12 unit facility in downtown Larkspur. It is the old St. Patrick's Convent. It was done 2 years ago. I'm a member of St. Pat's, have been for a long time. I called Monsignor Patazinski and talked to him the other day about it, just to get his perspective. They have had no issues at all for 2 years. It is run by Homeward Bound. I also checked with CMPA. They have had no calls at all in 2 years at the facility. It has done very, very well, and it is run by Homeward Bound, which is the next point I wanted to make. I know Homeward Bound very well also from my work with the committee, and they are an incredible organization. They are just smart and very careful, and helped us and the county move to a program that also wasn't talked about too much. And I think this is part of that program, and that's called Housing First, which is a program the county moved to about 2 years ago. It used to be that when people had to move into housing, if they were homeless, there was a whole list of requirements they had to fulfill for counseling and health and all these sorts of things. And we changed that and basically said, get people into housing and figure out the rest of it afterwards. And because a lot of these people actually have income, they have Social Security, some of them have Section 8 vouchers already. And if you get them into housing, the thing we have found is all the other problems start to solve themselves. I think the success rate has been something like 90% for people that get into housing under this program. And it has done really, really well in the county. We have actually been reducing the number of homeless people in the county as a result. And I know it is difficult for a lot of people to think about, but I would support moving forward with Todd's plan, which I think is excellent. I think Todd did a really good job of outlining what the issues are. listening to what the community had to say, but also more importantly, defining concrete programs that will help address those things. And if we can work through that with the county, I think we can figure this program out and make it work in a way that works for the community, but also really helps us solve, I think, a problem in this county that we have a responsibility to solve as elected officials. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. David?
I really appreciate Councilmember Ravazio's statement just now. I think he really hit the nail on the head on several aspects of this. I guess I too am frustrated with our lack of a decision and inability for action, but I also want to focus on, I counted a dozen, an even dozen, maybe a baker's dozen of folks who talked tonight who are affirmative about this development. And I forwarded to Rebecca Vaughn 31 affirmative emails that I received about this project. And so it's not by any means a unanimous opposition, wave of opposition. Obviously, there are concerns and fears. I would start with health professional Lisa Levitt's very memorable phrase, "Housing is medicine." And I think that's in some ways the core to the purpose of this particular project, which is addressed to frailer, relatively single homeless who are at risk for COVID-19, probably older. And when, in my experience of over 20 years with financing of affordable housing and historic developments and so forth, when people know that they have a thing of great value, that is a home for once, for which they only are paying 30% of their income, whatever that might be, Social Security, disability income, or whatever their income might be, they're protected for only 30%. They are going to value that privilege really significantly, and they're going to walk a fine line so as not to risk losing that privilege. That's I think a definite experience of this industry, which a few of the callers tonight, Ruth and Jan and so forth, would agree with from their direct experience. I think there are a couple of open-ended things that we should make sure that we have on the success list, but they're not necessarily obvious. There's not necessarily an obvious answer. Scott was the first one to bring up the question of the screening. And I think a few other people echoed this. We have to have careful screening. We have to have priority for Corte Madera residents and so forth. And yes, indeed, that's true. One of the very knowledgeable folks, having been through it, Emily, indicated opposition to screening for mental health. There is a fine line between sort of making sure we are putting forward affirmative criteria without noodling and interfering with people's personal privileges and rights as individuals. Yes, providing services and care for sure, but that process of vetting is not a simple, obvious process for this population. And I think that's one of the things that the community committee is going to have to really take up and wrestle with and talk with an attorney about, as well as talk with professionals who have done that kind of work. For Patty Stolier's oft repeated request for the sidewalk, yes, that is in the capital improvement plan. Yes, I believe, Charles, tell me if I'm wrong, we are asking for county assistance, for TAM assistance in that multi-million-dollar project that is going to be done as soon as we are able to get to it. I think that a couple of folks concern about trying to secure and solidify the long-term source of funding and amounts of funding is a critical thing that we have to put sort of in our forward questions about the, excuse me, to the county and others, because that issue runs across all affordable housing projects. And yes, there will likely have to be a long-term, and that's 50 to 55-year extended use agreement. Anytime the state puts a lot of money and the federal government puts a lot of money into supportive housing, you got to have an extended use agreement that is a 50 or 55-year low-income compliance that is rarely funded in advance. Rarely, if ever, is it funded in advance. But that's the way we in the United States handle our affordable housing programs. Anyway, this has been a very good eye-opening evening, and I agree very much with Bob that Todd's, how do we get to yes? How do we get to success? And let's take the biggest fears and the biggest complaints and turn them into criteria for success is absolutely the desirable way to move forward and to address the county. Thank you very much for this opportunity to comment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. Who else would like to speak? Fred? You're muted.
Before I have a comment, I just have a quick question for Rebecca. Rebecca, just to put in perspective, can you let everybody know how many email comments you got? And I want to say how many were favorable versus unfavorable.
These are just for the emailed comments that we received after the agenda publication, but before the start of the meeting this evening. And there were 38 in favor and 7 against. But I did not count how many of those were residents. Okay. I can do that now if you'd like. If they gave their listed residents.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat, but I agree with some of the comments that both Bob and David made. I can feel the frustration of everybody. And I think part of the frustration is with the county, again, moving so fast, the lack of notification. And I think from my perspective also, it's a lack of control that we have over this project, because in a sense, we don't have control over it. So I would go with Todd's suggestion, because I think the next best step is to partner with the county and get our ask done. The thing that I'm concerned about with is the time frame. I'm not sure when Marin County is planning on approving the actual purchase, and where I'll say our asks or successes fit into that, because they kind of go hand in hand. If the county decides, this is far-fetched, but tomorrow to buy it, and our asks come after that, it's after the fact. And I think we've lost any position we have, because the flip side of that is we have all these asks and the county can't meet them or doesn't want to, then I think we have to take an alternative step. But if that property is purchased, it's already a done deal. So I think that's one concern I have. It's almost like our time frame has to move faster than the way the county's moving, which may be difficult to do, but I have confidence in staff. One idea I like that did come up, I think it was Jim Andrews. I like the idea, I think he mentioned it, about if there is a 50% occupancy ratio to begin with, have 50% of those people move in, the other 50% have Marin County front the money to get those units with kitchenette set up, so it's more permanent housing, move the 9 into those kitchenettes, and then finish the other 9 units. I think that will transition more into permanent housing a lot faster, because if all of a sudden they move all 18 people in there, I don't understand how they're going to be able to remodel those units. If people are living there, they would have to move them out again and then move them back in. So I think if it's a 9.5 type thing, I think that would make more sense. I also think that that's a good transition for the town, because this way we don't have all 18 moving in, half are moving in at one time, and it's more of a transitional type thing. And this way it gets the town acclimated to the programs that Homeward Bound has. And if there's any issues, those issues can be flushed out earlier before all 18 people would move in. But again, my main concern is just the timing of the whole thing and how fast the county's moving, and that if the county purchases it tomorrow, does that mean our asks go away? So those are my comments. Thanks.
Hey, Fred, I just want to say I had the same concern as you, especially on that timing issue. I actually had a very nice phone call with Supervisor Rodoni today, so I know he's on the line. Appreciate him being here with us tonight. I think this is really important for him to hear all of the community feedback. I asked him the same thing that you just brought up, which is, look, if you guys potentially a week from tomorrow are closing on this property, does that preclude we can't get a task force up and running and work through all these issues in 8 days? It can't be done. And so I had that same concern, and he explained to me, which was very helpful, that regardless of what happens on the 10th, whether they buy the property or not, that's not the end of the road in terms of our ability to problem solve things going forward. And it's an uncomfortable fact, but I think that truth stems from the fact that we have no leverage here. So it doesn't, the county's not coming to us for permission. So it doesn't make a difference to them whether we start working with them on problem solving or whether we complete the problem solving process before they purchase or whether that process runs until after they purchase. So I just wanted to kind of share, did that make sense? I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I appreciate, but one thing I would, and I appreciate that, but one thing I would add, I think if it's a partnership and it's kind of like a good neighbor type thing, then to me, the county should be acting as a good neighbor and partnering with the town and not just ignoring us and doing their own thing. So I understand, they could go out and buy and do their own thing. But again, I go back to the good neighbor thing. I think they should be acting as a good neighbor and partnering with us. And if they do partner with us and they do it the right way, this could be a model for other of these projects going forward down the road. And I'm sorry, Eli, one last thing is, I think, Todd, you mentioned that there's improvements in the budget for Casa Buena, I think maybe Meadow Suite sidewalks and stuff like that. If that is in capital improvement projects, I don't know how you can notify or get communications out to people in those neighborhoods so that they're aware that, hey, this is coming down the road. It's kind of like there's light at the end of the tunnel. If they know that there's going to be sidewalks and lights in the 2021-22 budget, but at least there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Thanks.
And I will do.
And one other thing that I just wanted to say based on what you just brought up is that you were mentioning the importance of the county acting as a good neighbor to us here, and I could not agree more. I think, like I said, they're not coming to us for permission. They're just not. They have the authority to do this project. The state just passed a law. They have everything they need to do this, whether we go down kicking or screaming or whether we try and work with them productively and shape this project with them to something that even if it's not our dream, even if it's not something that we'd ever ask for, it's at least something that we can live with. And I think that's so critical. So I think that's a really important kind of dynamic. Rebecca, are we at 9:30? Is that why you're raising your hand? Okay. Can I get a motion to extend this meeting, please? Do we do half-hour increments or what is it?
You need a motion to extend the meeting to 10 p.m. and then you would need a unanimous motion at 10 p.m. to extend it one more half hour.
I'll make a motion. We extend the meeting until 10 p.m.
Second.
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyways, yeah, Fred, I was just saying, I completely agree with you, right? I think what we need is for the county to treat us as a partner here and to listen to what we and our community are saying that we need in order to make this project something that we can live with. I want to touch on one other thing you mentioned, and then I'll let somebody else talk before I kind of give my remaining thoughts. But just since you brought it up, you brought a number of people brought up the Casa Buena Complete Streets project. It's the overhaul of Casa Buena Drive that's coming up. I think it's already in design. It's way overdue. I feel terrible for our residents who've been waiting years for this, but it's in design now. It's coming down the pipe. But it brings to light, I think, the whole kind of issue of offsite mitigations, which is another thing that I think we need to be asking our partners, the county, for with regards to this project, right? Is because Casa Buena already needs our love and attention as a town council, right? And we've been hearing from them about litter issues. We've been hearing from them about sidewalks. We've been hearing from them about lack of street lights. These are things that need to happen. And I think that we should include in our list of asks and in what we work on with our task force here, off-site mitigations for this project, county assistance with these long-standing issues in Casa Buena that could be reasonably, feared to be exacerbated by this project. So, I just wanted to throw that out there since it had kind of come up tangentially. Charles, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so one is I'd like to thank Adam and Todd. I've really heard a lot of residents. I've gotten a lot of emails, and ultimately I feel like staff is enabled in this situation to best speak for those residents. I've seen the residents organize, and I've seen them effectively communicate as a group, both to the staff at the county level and the city, to express their concerns and create this. And so therefore, I think Todd and Adam have done a good job of putting those points together. And the town council has been aware of it and been working with staff for many months. So I would like to let the represented residents know that that has been going on. Also, I would like to remind the council that we do ultimately have 9,800 residents that have voted in us to represent them, but those 9,800 voters also vote for the supervisors of the county, and we are not removed from our influence in the county decision-making process. And so therefore, I highly recommend that those 9,800 residents are represented by those supervisors. So that's all I would like to say. And that's about the accountability after the property purchase, is that the ongoing accountability of our elected officials extend far beyond any one decision. So that's really what I wanted to add to that. I do think that given the situation of COVID, the state kind of authority, the funding and the desire to tackle homelessness, that this is a project that will go forward in some form, and that I definitely, since the get-go in talking with Todd, have been suggesting that we work with the residents to find out what that yes is. And I've been really supportive of the dialogue and communication with the residents and the staff in trying to do that. And I'm very happy with the results. I really wish it was more. If you want to hear one of the more exotic things, it's like Marin Joe's should provide the 2 meals a day for the people that are in those 18 things. I mean, ultimately they have reduced capacity and they cater all kinds of great food. So, I mean, that's how much I care about the local community and how it'll affect it, but how we could make it a win-win. So know that all my decision-making and kind of guidance that I've given is in that kind of light. So that's all I wanted to share with everyone.
Thank you, Charles. And that's a cool idea about having Marin Joe's or a local business. I just think that I think part of the one theme that we keep hitting on here is how do we make this, if we're having this project dropped in our laps, how do we at least make it a Corte Madera project, right? So it's like, how do we have Corte Madera residents who are homeless be the ones who are getting these spots? How do we have Corte Madera businesses be the ones who are providing services and things like that? I think that's a very interesting and valid line of inquiry, and something that we should definitely pursue through our task force and through our interactions with the county as we go forward here. I guess if I were going to give my kind of like overarching thoughts here, frankly, the residents see this. They've already noted this, but it's like the county has given every indication that it's going ahead with this thing on next Tuesday, right? I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. What's so frustrating to me is that it feels like this project could be such a win for the community if it met certain very common sense, not difficult to achieve criteria, right? And if we think about it, like, what could this project provide? Like, one, it's the right thing to do, right? Helping the homeless, that's the right thing to do. 2, getting homeless people in Corte Madera out of our marsh and off our hillside and into shelter, everybody wins there. It's better, frankly, it's better for residents to not have homeless people, out on the streets and in our wildlands where they have been known to start fires and be a danger to themselves and others. If they're in shelter with supportive services and with 24-hour staffing, that really significantly decreases the risk level and the public safety hazard. And then the last thing, and a resident brought this up, actually I think it was in one of the emails that we received, this project is going to count towards our RENA numbers, which is the number of housing units that Corte Madera is mandated to build every year by ABAG. So every year we're required to build X number of units in all these different tiers of affordability, right? And we don't have that much housing development going on in Corte Madera lately. Honestly, thanks in part to Tam Ridge, which took a lot of the pressure off of us. But when development does come in, it tends to be market rate units because that's what developers make money off of. And like affordable housing gets left behind, right? And developers don't come in and build affordable housing out of the good of their hearts. So I think, if we were to try and look for a silver lining here, it's that the county is in this project also dropping, basically an 18 unit credit in our lap with regards to our RENA numbers for affordable housing. So those are a few ways in which I think this project could really ultimately be a good thing for Corte Madera. But as we've said, there are a ton of frustrations here, right? I mean, we've been working really hard to engage with the county on this for, weeks now, weeks and weeks. And it's like, so far, all we've got to show for it, it feels like, is an agreement that we'll do a task force. And we need a task force, but we also need more than a task force. We need commitments in writing. We need answers to our questions. Again, what we're asking for is very common sense, right? We want a development that's safe, that's clean, that's discreet. We want supporting services. We want the law enforcement that's going to make sure that everybody stays safe, residents and neighbors alike. We want to make sure that there's a solid vetting and placement process for the people who are going to live here, and we want to make sure that the design is aesthetically pleasing and that there's privacy, right? That it's got vegetation screening it and whatnot. We have neighbors with privacy concerns who live nearby, and they don't want potentially residents of this facility traipsing through their property. All very reasonable, all very understandable, and frankly, all very achievable. So that's kind of what kills me about this project, right? Is it's like the criteria for success, they're so like, we can do it. I know we can do it. I know the county can do it. And frankly, I have decent confidence that they will do it. But we just need this stuff in writing, right, before this moves forward. And it's not a big ask. So, we're going to be, Todd said, we're going to be working going forward with the county on this. I'm very hopeful that we can get, some of our questions answered and some of our, demands is the wrong word, but that we can get some of these assurances in writing before the November 10th meeting when the county, likely moves forward with this. I think that would be key to really helping restore public trust in this project. And it's like, what we need more than anything from the county is a seat at the table, and that's the task force. That's having a say in offsite mitigations, commitments in writing about all these things. I think we should have 1 or 2 resident observers sit in on the interviews where they're screening potential residents, because I think Corte Maderans deserve to know who their proposed neighbors are going to be in this project. I think that's very reasonable. So, I don't want to talk in circles too much, but it kills me that it feels like this project could be such a good thing. It should be such a good thing. It shouldn't be hard to get there. And I'm really hopeful that if we work really hard on this over the next 8 days, we're going to be able to get somewhere, by the time the county has their next Board of Supervisors meeting, where, at least the residents, we got a lot of residents who are in support, a lot of residents who are stringently opposed, and a lot of residents who are open to it, but they've got questions and they need answers. And we're going to engage all of these folks equally and in good faith. But I just think that ultimately, we need to get to the point where we have these answers and we have these assurances before the county moves forward. I'm going to stop there. Does anybody else have any comments they'd like to make?
Great statement.
Thank you. Todd, do you feel like you have clear direction from us? So it sounds like a resounding big yes on, we need this task force up and running as soon as possible. We need resident representatives on it. We need let's work closely together today and tomorrow, tonight and tomorrow. We need a well-defined list of asks, and then let's you and me sit down with county officials and staff members and just say, hey, look, this is what we need. How can we get to yes on as many of these as possible in writing before your next meeting where you approve this project? Did I leave anything out, council members?
I think we have a full expectation. Adam and I will put our heads together and add to our list to make sure we have a good draft. We'll get that. We'll work through the mayor on that, and then engage Supervisor Rodoni as soon as tomorrow and start these conversations.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize to everybody who's getting swept up in the ridiculous pace of this project. It sucks. It's being dictated by state deadlines, and we're all just scrambling and playing catch up. So I remain faithful that we're going to ultimately be able to arrive at a mutually acceptable solution here, but it's going to take a lot of work going forward, and we are in for that work. So with that, I think we can close this discussion. We'll go ahead and move on to item 6B, which is consideration and possible action to adopt resolution 36/2020 to create the new position of code enforcement and communications manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is the second of 2 meetings per council policy. And again, we gave a full report at the last meeting. And again, this is now requesting action for the council to approve our request of adding this position and setting the salary resolution. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff on this? I do not have any questions. We'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. Any members of the public on the line, if you would like to comment or ask a question about this item, please go ahead and raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. And Rebecca, did we receive any emailed public comments on this item?
We didn't receive any emailed public comments on this item.
Thank you. And we don't have any hands up, so I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and a motion. Fred.
Yeah, if there's no comments, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to second the motion, in particular because of the clever combination of code enforcement and communication, which don't often belong together, but they do belong together, and both work better with each of those talents. So it's a great, very creative and appropriate solution, particularly for the person you've selected.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Rebecca, can we have a vote, please?
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. That brings us to 6C, which is consideration and possible adoption of resolution 39/2020, approving a publicly available pay schedule per CalPERS regulations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a follow-up to the last item. Now that we have approved this position and salary range, we are obligated to update our publicly available pay scale for CalPERS purposes and to the public. And so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Todd. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm going to open this up for public comment. If you'd like to comment on this item, please raise your hand via Zoom or email publiccomment@tcmmail.org. Rebecca, do we have any emailed public comments?
No emailed public comments.
Thank you, and no hands up. So I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and a motion. There's no comments. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the publication.
Second.
Councilmember Casissa?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kuhnhart?
Yes.
Mayor Beckman?
Yes, thank you. That brings us to item 7, council reports and town manager reports. We'll start with the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I just want to give an update regarding ABAG, RENA, housing. I'm going to use the town manager's agenda item moving forward to have Adam give us updates as we move forward through this process. So we keep the council and the community updated. And Adam's on the line, but as I understand it, we have made our revisions and sent our letter on regarding our comments for the RENA and ABAG, item that we had before council at a previous meeting. Adam, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but I'm just appreciative of Adam. He took a leadership role. We were the first council to take this on and send a letter. And I know that a lot of other jurisdictions followed the lead of the council's comments. Which letter was drafted by Adam. So I just really appreciate that. And again, the town taking a leadership role was very important. So.
And just real quick on that, just to add, we are currently in the official public comment, 30-day public comment review period for the RENA allocation. So what's being recommended is that we'll, from ABAG essentially is that we just send the letter in again to the forthcoming Housing Methodology Committee meeting. So I think we plan on doing that.
Great, thank you. We'll go to council member reports. Fred? Oh, Fred, you're muted.
Sorry. I attend the God, I hack that up all the time. I'm sorry. MMC Economic Recovery Committee meeting, which was last week, and also the monthly meeting last week. And I also attended the age-friendly Corte Madera monthly meeting. I'll keep it short. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Charles, are you still with us? He may have had to go. I think he has to.
I'm here. Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. David?
We did have the steering committee meeting of the Corte Madera Climate Adaptation Group and Project last week. There's a lot of work forthcoming. Stay tuned for some big plans for hillsides and for low-lying areas.
Thank you. I will not report on that then. So the only two other things, we had a meeting of our Climate Action Committee, the first in a while. We approved the most recent draft of our climate action plan, and we're moving forward with a climate emergency resolution. And then we also had a community chat last Tuesday, like we do every other Tuesday. And I just wanted to recap for folks because I think it's important. Supervisor Radoni was our special guest there. And so it became, basically we had a lot of residents attend and everybody just wanted to talk about home key. And it wasn't substantially different from what we heard tonight, but I just wanted to give you guys that added context about, other ways in which we're hearing the same things from residents. That is all I've got to report. Item 8, do we have any comments on the draft agenda for our next meeting? And if not, we can go ahead and adjourn.
Good job.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Todd, can you stay on for a sec? I forgot to mention this when we left closed session. We are very appreciative of your, it was just very big of you to recommend that we not go through with your bonus this year. I think and we all certainly know that you are very, very much deserving of a bonus. But with the pandemic and what it's doing to budgets, I think you made absolutely the right recommendation there, and we are so appreciative of your service and of you kind of making that sacrifice there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Our pleasure. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.